Hey there everyone, Joel Reads Comics back again for another supercut, and hey, you know what, the Supergirl movie is going to be here before we know it, and because I already did DC Rebirth Superman, I thought, hey, you know what, it's only right to do the second half of that equation, to do Action Comics from Dan Jurgens, which, you know, was a story and an arc and a, run that I must say was, basically as good as what was going on with Superman. This was an era where, two books were absolutely killing it back to back, and in assembling this video, there was so much great stuff in here that I forgot. This is where the Mr. Oz stuff comes from. There's a very good Superman Revenge Society storyline here. Perhaps most interestingly, this is one of the first times where they also tried out Lex being a good guy and rocking his own Superman costume and everything, which is kind of hilarious because you read what's going on in the comics now with Joshua Williamson, and history has literally repeated itself. We've literally come full circle, and Lex is trying to be a good guy again. I hope everyone enjoys this. There's about 2 hours of goodness here. We get the entire run, issue number 1000 of Action Comics, which was a big landmark issue, and we get the special Lex Fallout issue as well. So, I tried to make this as complete an omnibus as humanly possible. The Superman Reborn storyline and event is also in here too, because you kind of have to have it. And yeah, no more grandstanding, no more hot dogging. Let's get to it, everyone. I hope you enjoy it.
Alrighty then, so as the comic opens, we can see a group of heavily armed men have taken a bank full of innocent people hostage. The police respond to the call, led by Maggie Sawyer, the returning head of their major crimes unit, after spending a long stint in Gotham. Jimmy Olsen arrives on the scene too to take some pictures, and he and indeed everyone else is shocked to see the situation dealt with not by Superman, but by Lex Luthor, who is still wearing his Apocalyptian battle armor, given to him by the freed slaves of Apocalypse, who fashioned him a brand new suit in the style of Superman. From there, we check on in with the White family, aka the Kent family, displaced from their own Earth in the fallout of Convergence. Again, this is a lot of continuity going into this book, but all you need to know is that this is the Lois and Superman that you remember. The family is moving into their new home today. They were displaced at the end of Super League, in case you didn't read that. Their son, Jonathan, is also exhibiting new superpowers every day. His parents try their hardest to instill in him the idea that these new abilities are not something he can use to cheat everyday life, like moving in more boxes or hooking up the TV first. Then again, it's a good thing he did, because Clark ends up seeing what Luthor is doing on TV, and he is really disgusted at the idea that such an evil villain, even if this isn't the Luthor he knew, could appropriate his family's symbol like this. It's because of this Clark White suits up in his brand new Superman costume and decides to go to Metropolis to have a showdown with Luthor. It's also at this point we find out those bank robbers weren't actually after any money. They were instead trying to create a smokescreen to get everyone's attention while another group of thieves robbed a place across town. The truly amazing thing, though, is that when Superman actually does have his stare down with Luthor, Luthor sees completely through him, going, "No, you're too old, you're too experienced, too sure of yourself, you're not my Superman is dead. You're an imposter, Superman." And I mean, Lex isn't totally wrong. The DC Universe has been having a major problem with the imposter Superman as of late, so he decides he's going to defend the populace of Metropolis from this new guy. What follows is one gigantic superpower dick measuring contest as these two have at each other. What Lex lacks in strength and powers, he more than makes up for in advanced technology. This is also a pretty momentous moment for Superman as well, because this is his first time making his appearance to the world and letting it known at large that there is a new, different Superman on Earth, even if most regular people just assume he's the same Superman that he always was. To make matters even more interesting, Superman and Lex are both being monitored by the mysterious hooded Mr. Oz, who, from what I understand, appeared in another Superman story and also again in DC Rebirth, so clearly he's important. The two men end up fighting so hard and for so long they end up causing a disturbance, which means the robbers from before drop their massive package right in the middle of the city. And what was so important that it involved a huge scheme to try and acquire? Well, it's Doomsday, of course. Not a larval Doomsday, not any of the other Doomsdays we've seen before in the New 52. Oh no. This is the original Doomsday, who killed the original Superman in the original Death of Superman storyline, and now he's here. So as the comic opens, Superman is still positively reeling with the return of Doomsday. Not a larval Doomsday, not anything that was going on in Superman Doomed. The real, honest, genuine article Doomsday, the one from his Earth that killed him. Superman does absolutely everything in his power to try and take Doomsday down, but we all know what giving his all meant last time when these two crossed paths. Superman also later notes that it's interesting that Doomsday seemed to already have been been in the city as there was no trail of destruction. Making matters even worse is that Lois and Jonathan, Superman's son and wife, are forced to watch all of this as it happens at home, and Lois, mother that she is, needs to give Jonathan a very serious talk about the threat that Doomsday poses, how he actually managed to kill his father back over on his Earth. And then, you know what, I'm sure that conversation got pretty silly too, as Lois had to tell this young boy about the reign of the Superman, the super mullets, and the super black costume with the super leg pouch. So yeah, if you couldn't tell, this story is making a lot of allusions and a lot of references to the original Death of Superman story, but there is one big difference here, and that is that this world's Lex Luthor is a good guy, and a good guy who wants to make a name for himself by showing up Superman, so he too enters the fray. Granted, he doesn't do all that much better than Superman, but when buildings start falling and people are in need, Lex Luthor actually does answer the call and actually does manage to save some lives. What Lex wasn't expecting, though, to run into is Clark Kent. That is a completely unrelated Clark Kent, yet another person who he calls to be an imposter. Superman attempts to get Doomsday out of the city with plans of dropping him into the sun. Unfortunately, a spiky bone knee to the face stops that plan right quick. Yes, it would seem Doomsday isn't fighting like the enraged savage beast that Superman remembers. This Doomsday is somehow different. He's using strategy. Case in point, Doomsday goes out of his way to knock a news chopper down, knowing full well that Superman will break off his fight with him to go save the innocent people, and he does, which means that Lex Luthor thinks this is the ideal opportunity to charge the monster and be a big hero. It does not go well for him. Doomsday cracks open that fancy apocalyptian armor like it was a lobster shell. And thus the comic ends with us not being sure if Luthor got ripped to shreds or not, and also the mysterious hooded Mr. Oz watching all of these events from afar. Okay then, so this comic actually opens on a really emotional note as we get Lois Lane's internal monologue recounting the events of the original Death of Superman storyline. The added twist is now she's a wife and a mother, and she's not exactly sure what to say to her young son Jonathan. You know, should she lie to try and make him feel better by saying, oh yeah, Daddy's totally gonna win this fight, or does she come out and say, well, he didn't win last time, which doesn't really fill me with hope this time. Back in Metropolis, Doomsday continues to tear the superheroes to shreds. That includes Lex Luthor, who gets his fancy new apocalyptian battle armor all broken up. Of course, as we find out later, one of the abilities of this new suit is self-repair, so that's good. Imagine all the money Lex Luthor will now save on tailoring. Now, this older, more mature Superman attempts to try and learn from his last fight with Doomsday, taking him underground in an attempt to minimize casualties. But wouldn't you know it, one of the civilians who ends up getting sucked into the sinkhole is none other than that mysterious Clark Kent who has been running around, the one who seems to have no powers nor any knowledge about Superman. It's also here that Lex Luthor very begrudgingly actually takes Superman's advice and decides to round up any stragglers to make sure they all get out of the city safe so that Superman can deal with Doomsday. Very slowly but surely, it seems that this Superman is starting to warm up to this world's version of Lex. Yeah, he's still as arrogant as ever, but the only difference is he actually does seem to want to help people this time around. Now, Superman's new tactic for fighting Doomsday is to hopefully keep him at arm's length long enough to actually do something about it via his heat vision. Unfortunately, luck is against the Man of Steel in this scenario, because Superman's heat vision ends up nicking a gas main, causing a massive crater to be blown in part of Metropolis. As the comic winds down, we get an absolutely amazing shot of Doomsday emerging from the fire and the flames to once again threaten the life of the Clark Kent. So, picking up from where the last issue left off, Doomsday was about to splatter that powerless Clark Kent that's been running around into a very unfortunate stain. He's saved, however, at the last minute by Wonder Woman of all people, who ends up joining the fray. And you know what, considering that they've been doing nothing but fighting for what feels like the last 4 issues, this new infusion of a brand new hero is actually a really welcome change. Wonder Woman's being here means Superman finally manages to get a leg up in the fight against Doomsday, and even Luthor continues to be helpful, trying to clear the city out and stop any more damage from taking place. Yeah, it seems like the first time since the fight started, the superheroes are actually winning it for a change. Now, while all of this is going on, Jonathan, Superman's son, is watching at home with Lois. He gets so excited over the prospect of his dad pulling victory from the jaws of defeat, he ends up shattering all the windows in their house without even meaning to. Proof positive of just how strong Jonathan White will be once he fully grows into his powers. This ends up, however, sending a signal to Doomsday in the city, which causes him to break off his attack and go into the country. With a few precious moments of respite from the fight, Superman actually talks shop about what this Doomsday is with the other heroes. How he's a creature from Krypton's past, how he's the ultimate killing machine, how anytime you beat him, you won't be able to beat him that way a second time. The funny thing is that the whole time Luthor is listening to this, all he can think is, that's fucking awesome. Why did I never think to build my own Doomsday? I should build a Doomsday like tomorrow. Eventually, it does dawn on Superman the Doomsday is more or less a Kryptonian-seeking missile, and if he's broken the fight off with him, that means there's only one place left in the world he could be going. Luckily, Superman and his team are able to get to Lois and Jonathan before the monster does. This scene also gives us a really great little exchange between Lois and Wonder Woman. You see, Lois feels that Wonder Woman might be awkward around her and this Superman, considering that they're so much in love, they have a child, etc., etc., while Wonder Woman was in love with this world Superman and now he's gone. In an interesting twist, Wonder Woman says no, she's fine with it, she's cool, she hopes that her and Lois can be friends like they were back on the other Earth, and that seeing her together with Clark Superman, it feels right. And I mean, you know, also she's got a movie coming up and she's gonna have to be in love with Steve Trevor there, so probably good to make this a clean break here and now for everybody. This very touching moment turns to a very badass moment where Wonder Woman puts herself in between the loving white family and Doomsday blocking a massive hit with her shield. Man, if you're gonna leave it on a cliffhanger, that's a hell of a cliffhanger to leave on. Alright, so as the comic opens up, we're treated to Lex Luthor attempting to keep peace in the now crumbling Metropolis in the wake of the fight between Superman and Doomsday. The funny thing is, old Lex ends up not having to do this all on his lonesome. There's the depowered new Clark Kent who showed up out of nowhere. He's doing his best to lend a hand, even with a broken arm. But if that wasn't enough, there's also an absolute blink and you'll miss it cameo from Superwoman, who we will cover more in the Superwoman book. For that, be sure to stay tuned to the channel for when that review comes out. Now, where are the rest of our heroes, you might be asking yourself? Well, they're still in the countryside right now dealing with Doomsday, who was lured out there in an attempt to hunt down Jonathan White. The fight gets uglier and uglier, but luckily they're far enough from the city that there are no innocent bystanders around anymore. This means Superman is finally able to cut loose and hit Doomsday with both barrels like never before. Granted, Superman is still slightly a little unfocused, what with his wife and son still being so close to danger. Luckily, Wonder Woman is there to shield the two, but moreover than that, when asked, Wonder Woman decides to take Jonathan and Lois to the Watchtower for safekeeping, figuring that, hey, Doomsday can't get them up in space, right? Not yet, anyway. There's actually a pretty great little scene where Jonathan wants to continue watching the fight, knowing full well that his father will win, but Wonder Woman and his mother, they're not exactly sure, especially considering how Superman's last fight with Doomsday went. When Superman does fully unleash on Doomsday, it's a thing of beauty. Superman tries to put to work everything he learned fighting the monster before. Be faster, be smarter, don't give him any breathing room, etc., etc. In the end, though, Superman is ultimately not the one who defeats the Doomsday monster. Instead, it's a bunch of faceless mooks shooting laser beams at him. Yeah, apparently these guys work for that mysterious Mr. Oz who has been puppeteering events all along. He's finally ready to make his move against Superman now, and you just know things are about to get a lot worse before they get any better as the comic ends. Alright, so as the comic opens up, we are once again on the Watchtower, where Lois Lane and Jonathan White, Superman's wife and child, are hanging out with Wonder Woman. From this vantage point, they can see the whole battle, but it doesn't exactly make them feel any better. Quite the opposite. A good chunk of their story this issue is them begging Wonder Woman to go back down and help out Superman, even though she, pretty much swore to protect them against all costs. Now, in the previous issue, we saw a henchman of Mr. Oz dispatched to try and either defeat or capture Doomsday. That went about as well as you figure it would have. So now, once again, as it's been through pretty much the entirety of this 5-issue story arc, it's Superman versus Doomsday with the fate of the entire planet hanging in the balance, typical superhero stuff. This older, wiser Superman, however, does prove to have one last trump card up his sleeve, and that is his own personal Fortress of Solitude, the one he kept secret and separate from the New 52 Superman's fortress. For you see, it's at this secret lair that Superman keeps his very most secret stash of technology, stuff that he was forced to jerry-rig together in his time in this universe. One of these things just so happens to be a functional phantom zone generator, which, man, if this doesn't open up about a million interesting questions, I'm not sure what does, considering that this is a Superman from another world or another time, depending on how you look at it, who built a phantom zone projector. Does that connect to the phantom zone from his world, or does it connect to the phantom zone from this one? Either way, Wonder Woman does eventually join the fight and distract Doomsday long enough for Superman to get the drop on him and finally defeat the monster. With that threat finished, for now at least, Superman is able to turn his attention to Metropolis, namely Lex Luthor, who is still running around as something of a superhero. You would think after working together and getting a lot of good work done, they might be willing to hug it out. No, they're still pretty distrustful of each other, and Lex is Lex. He doesn't play well with others. They do, however, agree to something of a ceasefire, saying that if they continue to battle each other the way they are, Metropolis, the city that they both love, will be burnt to cinders in the process. So yeah, in summation, it looks like everything got wrapped up in a nice little package, didn't it? Well, of course, except for that mysterious Mr. Oz who was pulling all the strings from the beginning and who, as the comic ends, we discover has actually managed to hijack Doomsday from the Phantom Zone. Yep, now he has his own personal super weapon. Dun dun dun. Alright, so as the comic opens, we check on in with Clark Kent, or at least that third Clark Kent, the mysterious one who's been running around. In his internal monologue, we find out that before he quote-unquote disappeared, he was investigating a company called Genetatron. And now that he's back like the good journalist that he is, he wants to find the story and get to the bottom of what's going on there, even if it ends up killing him. Now from there, we flash on back to a big news press conference where Lex Luthor, the brand new owner and publisher of the Daily Planet, pats himself on the back for a job well done during the Doomsday Crisis. Lex also wants to use this as an opportunity to bring the new Clark Kent forward and dispel any rumors about him. If you remember, Lois Lane ended up outing Superman's secret identity as Clark Kent, so this guy has a lot of explaining to do, and he does. He says that he had always kind of looked like Superman, and when the Genetatron story got too dangerous, Superman agreed to switch places with him until the heat died down. Now obviously, as the reader, this story doesn't make sense to us, but Lex decides to put this story to a lie detector test, and the Clark ends up passing. As far as he knows, he's telling the truth, and as a matter of fact, we find out later in this same issue that this lie detector was actually administered by Batman of all people, so you know it's trustworthy, unlike most lie detector tests that are kinda BS. And you know what, speaking of things that are kinda bullshit, and we get a chance to check on in with Clark and Jimmy Olsen interacting together. You'll remember in the last arc, Jimmy was so sure that this guy was Superman and asked him to help save the day, but was shocked when he couldn't. Now it seems Jimmy has almost completely changed his tune, going, yeah, Clark, you were never Superman, I agree. If nothing else, these two journalists do manage to hit upon a pretty interesting tidbit of information, and that is that the Genetatron building was robbed the same day Doomsday showed up, meaning that this was indeed the building that Doomsday came from. When Clark and Jimmy attempt to confront the head of Genetatron, he understandably says he's never seen either of these men before, and there was never any story being done on him or his company. So yeah, a lot of things in a row are not exactly adding up, and this is what pushed this Clark to try and break into the building and see what he could find, even if he admitted that that's not a very Clark Kent thing to do. It is a very Lois thing. Company security ended up grabbing this Clark and attempted to execute him by throwing him off the building. Also, wow, this security dude's gotta be super strong if he can lift this full-grown man up. Clark Kent is saved by the last-minute intervention of Superman, who says that, yeah, we really need to have a talk, you and I, as the comic ends. Superman takes Clark. Again, it feels weird to call him Clark because we don't really know who or what he is yet. I always feel like I need to put a question mark at the end of Clark. Question Clark. Yeah, I'm gonna call him Question Clark from now on. Superman takes Question Clark to his secret fortress of solitude. You'll remember in the last issue, this dude passed a lie detector test proving that he truly does believe himself to be Clark Kent, and if he is faking it, he's doing a truly excellent job of it too, because even to Superman's supervision, he does appear to be truly cold, and his, vitals do show him to be completely human. Luckily, being Superman, Big Blue just so happens to have an alien artifact hanging out in his base of operations that should be able to discern whether or not this Clark is the genuine article once and for all. It's kinda like an orb of insight that reads a person's deepest, most thoughts and feelings. Invasive, you better believe it, and at first Question Clark doesn't want to do it, but hey, this is Superman he's dealing with, he's gotta be able to trust him, right? At first, the orb doesn't tell us anything we don't already know. This Clark claims that he switched places with the previous, now deceased Superman once his investigation into the Geneticron Corporation got too hairy. Now all of that is easily faked. It's the stuff that comes after, though, that gets really interesting and really kinda horrifying for Superman Superman, we see flashbacks of Clark Kent's life growing up in Smallville with Ma and Pa Kent, his friends Lana Lang, and everyone else. Those can't be faked, and those are memories very near and dear to this Superman's heart. The grand conclusion, this guy is Clark Kent, just with no Superman in him at all. How the hell is any of that possible? Well, Superman's not exactly sure, but he believes the Geneticron Corporation may be in some way connected, as he does know for a fact that they were connected to the Doomsday attacks. And if this new Question Clark and the old school Doomsday showed up around the same time, then clearly they must be connected, right? Only you see, here's the thing, when Superman and Question Clark decide to investigate the Geneticron Corporation together, they find that the entire building is missing, like gone. Geez, I've heard about pulling up stakes before, but this is just silly. Now, after spending the day with Superman, Question Clark, understandably as a journalist, has a lot to say, and he ends up writing a beautiful editorial to the Man of Steel. He also kind of takes this chance to set the record straight once and for all, saying, yes, I am not Superman. I know you thought I was, but I wasn't. Furthermore, this new guy we got flying around isn't the Superman that we remember, but he might actually be better. And he believes that because, well, he believes in me. Now, as the comic winds down, however, a mysterious hat-wearing gentleman who we saw at Geneticron before it disappeared ends up going into his apartment building, only to reveal a giant apocalyptic-looking planet with the Superman logo on it. Okay, that's really foreboding. Alrighty then, so as we join the comic, Lois Lane, I should stress that's the Lois Lane from the older universe, the one who's married to Superman right now, not New 52 Lois, enters the Daily Planet for the first time in a long time. It seems ever since her younger counterpart went missing, due in part to the events of the Superwoman comic, Lois hasn't been seen around the planet all that much, and now older Lois has decided to go in and more or less impersonate her. Lois is honestly surprised how much of the Daily Planet here on this Earth reminds her of her own world. Jimmy is still Jimmy, Steve Lombardi is still a jerk. All she needs is to hear Perry say Great Caesar's ghost, and you pretty much checked the entire card right there. So what's Lois even doing here? Well, that answer is twofold. For one, she's been having some really horrifying dreams involving her younger counterpart, and now that it seems that she's gone missing, Lois decided she would go in to try and find her. But moreover than that, she's starting to get a little restless with her life as a mother and a wife. Superman got to go back to his job, essentially filling the void left by the other Superman, but Lois doesn't really have a lot to do beyond ghostwriting. She misses the hustle and bustle of a newspaper. Clark is supportive of her getting back into the workforce, saying that she's sacrificed so much already for Superman and the rest of the family, it's only right that she does something for herself, especially now as things are starting to get really weird in Metropolis with the extra Clark Kent running around and Lex Luthor owning the Daily Planet. Superman could use as many eyes as he can in the city. Lois soon finds out that before the other Lois went missing, she was writing a book on the life and times of Superman, something that both Perry and, strangely enough, Lex are really interested in seeing completed. Lois, much like her husband Superman, isn't exactly sure how to take this new Lex. On one hand, they have a lot of experience with him being really evil, but this new guy doesn't seem like the Lex from their world. Now, that was a fun exchange and everything, but for my money, what was really the high point of this issue was getting to see this classic Lois interact with this new mysterious Clark Kent that showed up. This extra Clark is equal parts concerned and incredibly clumsy, but in his bumbling though, he does manage to give Lois a great idea, and that is to check the apartment of this other Lois Lane and to see what she was working on her home computer. Lois goes there, but she's shocked to be met by none other than Lana Lang, the brand new electric red Superwoman, as the comic ends. Okay then, so as the comic opens up, we check on back with Superman and Son. He's testing the limits of young Jonathan's power, and much like he was at his age, Jonathan doesn't have certain abilities yet, like X-ray vision. But at what point does he develop those weird Christopher Reeves powers, like throwing weird cellophane S's or kissing people and making them lose their memory? When does he get those? We do discover though that the young Superboy is actually an incredibly fast flyer. In fact, we're not exactly sure if Superman let him win their race home or if he was actually able to beat him. When the two supers get home though, they realize Lois is nowhere to be found. They assume she's still in Metropolis dealing with her business at the planet, and Clark says to his son that maybe this will happen more often if Mom goes back to work. In fact, we get a really sweet father-son conversation about, part of growing up is, you're not always going to have your parents around all the time, and your mother was a super career-oriented woman, and this is just kind of her way and everything. I like this a lot. Of course, we as the reader know what Lois is really doing is looking into the disappearance of her new 52 52 counterpart. When she went to her apartment, however, she was accosted by the new electric red Superwoman. You know, it's funny, it goes unstated in this comic, but I'm just reminded that this Lois we're dealing with right now, probably remembers the 1998 storyline wherein Superman became red and blue and that they were both in love with her at one point. Lois actually does a really smart thing where she turns her phone on, making it so that Superman with his super hearing can actually hear that she's in need, and he rushes over right away to defend her. At first, he assumes this electric Superwoman must be a villain, only to be shocked to discover, hey everybody, it's Lana Lang, and if you'll remember from the early days of DC Rebirth, these two characters had actually already met each other. Together, the three all watch a video on New 52 Lois's computer that more or less gets them up to speed on everything that's been going on in Superwoman, how when the New 52 Superman died, Lana and Lois were given amazing superpowers. Of course, for poor Lois, these powers were more of a curse than a gift, coming with some horrible side effects, sickness, headache, you know, the whole nine. Eventually, on her first mission, Superwoman Lois would be vaporized by an evil creature. And now that she's gone, Lois, Lana, and Superman have themselves one heck of a dilemma on their hands. Do they go around and tell the world that Lois has died, or do they let this older married Lois just kinda slip into the other Lois's life? I mean, it's not like they would be disrespecting her memory or anything. In fact, New 52 Lois asked this Lois to finish her book on Superman. Lois working at the Daily Planet too also means she's allowed to be fulfilled, but more importantly, it means that she can keep an eye on Lex Luthor, the planet's newest owner. It's pretty much too good a scenario to pass up, so everyone is in agreement that Lois will assume the identity of her younger New 52 self. Now that's just one story. As the comic ends, however, we get some follow-up on the strange hobo man from the previous issue. He opens up a portal and a terrible alien warrior named Zayd comes marching on through looking for a fight with Superman. Okay, so as we dig on into the comic, the planet Earth is destroyed, a smoldering wreck left in the wake of a bunch of parademons. Well, that was a short comic. I mean, at least it didn't waste my time or nothing. This, as we discover, is actually the far-flung future, a horrible future that was brought into being thanks to a Superman-looking figure. But it couldn't possibly be our Superman, right? In the present, Superman and his son Jonathan, the Superboy, are looking for the Genetron building. Jonathan takes this opportunity to ask his father about some of his costume choices over the years. FYI, this conversation is pure solid gold. I love that Jonathan asks all the questions a real son would ask. Hey, that black suit was cool, why don't you wear that anymore? Hey, what was with the underwear on the outside, Dad? Superman also gives really great answers that are really respectful to the long history of the character. He just doesn't throw the shorts under the bus because it would be funny to do so. Also, gee, Superman, don't let your kids see a picture of you with a mullet or electric blue and red Superman. I can only imagine the answers you'd have to give then. Now, while all this is going on, Lois is handling her business in Metropolis. She's been sent in to give a very important interview to Lex Luthor about all the works he's been trying to accomplish. Luthor, as we discover, has been keeping a close eye on Lois Lane ever since she came back to work at the Daily Planet, but also he's been keeping a close eye on that new mysterious Clark Kent that's been left around. The interview goes over pretty well. Lex talks about how he felt that Metropolis and the world was ready for a Superman not from beyond the stars, but a modern man who pulled himself up by his own bootstraps. While showing off his fancy new toys to Lois, we can also see that he's making use of that mother box he was given at the end of Darkseid War. He's turning it into a weapon because of course he is. Why do I feel if you gave Lex Luthor a paperclip, it would only take him a couple minutes to weaponize that as well? It's at that point Lex's office building comes under attack by one of the two time travelers. This nasty customer here goes by the name Lakal the Godslayer. Well, geez, I think I know what my next D&D character is going to be called now. This guy is incredibly powerful, managing to give Luthor more than a run for his money. But it's what this walking, talking heavy metal album cover says next that turns out to be quite distressing. He says in the future, Lex Luthor will return to his evil ways and use his mother box, as well as his connection to the planet of Apocalypse, to completely and utterly destroy the Earth. And so Lakal and his buddy Zayd have gone back in time to try and keep that from happening, all Terminator style. As the comic winds down, we get a terrifying image of Lex Luthor in this possible dark future sitting upon a throne, of which I can only assume is skulls. So as the comic opens up, Superman is still doing battle with Zayd, one of the crazy time travelers. It's funny, you know, while Lakal the Godslayer clearly seems human, Zayd does not. We also discover that Zayd, after seeing the S on Superman, assumes that he must be a follower or acolyte of Lex Luthor in the future, so that's why he's keeping him busy here and now. Young Jonathan can't stand to see his father getting his bell rung so thoroughly, and because of it he ends up entering the fray himself, even though he was told not to by driving a truck into Zayd. Aw, look everybody, Superboy's driving a car. They grow up so fast, don't they? Now back over in Metropolis, Lakal continues to read Lex Luthor the Riot Act about how he will one day ascend the throne of Darkseid in Apocalypse and destroy multiple worlds, including his. What's great about this is Lex Luthor's reaction. He basically goes, "That's stupid, you're stupid, everything's stupid." Even Superman, when he joins the fight, kinda has to agree with Lex on this one. Oh sure, he believes these guys are from the future, but he's done the whole, you know, possible future time travel dance enough times to know that this might just be a possible future, not the written in stone future. What's crazy about Zayd and Lakal is that they seem to utilize both advanced technology and magic. It also appears that this isn't the first Kryptonian they've ever run into either, as they came prepared. Superman gets stabbed in the fight, a fact that surprises Lois and the mysterious Clark Kent, who's also watching this fight right now, as that's something they're not really used to seeing. Lakal has Superman dead to rights, but before he can lop off his head though, he pulls off his attack when he sees Superboy over on the next rooftop, only he calls him Tasai. Or at the very least, seeing him reminds him of someone named Tasai, and because of that, both Lakal and Zayd call off their attack, saying that they will deal with Luthor in their future instead of here and now. Everyone in the vicinity agrees that that was pretty damn weird, but hey, you know what, just a day that ends in Y when you live in Metropolis, am I right? The mysterious extra Clark Kent, though, he feels differently. He really took what those guys said to heart and says that there's only one thing left for them to do, and that is kill Lex Luthor before he can destroy the future. Okay then, picking up from where the last issue left off, Superman is pretty shocked and taken aback by the fact that this extra Clark is calling for the head of Lex Luthor in an attempt to save the future. Murder-happy Clark Kents aside, they really can't do much about this issue right now because Lex is nowhere to be found. Those two aliens grabbed him and took him somewhere else. It's here the story actually takes something of a swerve, or at least I think it's a swerve. Maybe I just wasn't paying close enough attention. Turns out Cade and Lakal the Godslayer aren't actually from the future, as I had assumed. They're actually from an alien planet. They're part of some crazy religious order, and some old oracle woman actually gave them a vision of Lex Luthor coming to power through Apocalypse and destroying Earth. And from here, the rest of the comic actually kind of involves the origins of Lakal. We find out he was the best slayer of evil tyrants the universe had ever known, sent on multiple missions. And just like every great cop movie you've ever seen, he was 2 weeks away from retirement when the Oracle got a vision of Lex Luthor. Lakal has your standard tragic backstory. He lost a wife and daughter, one whose name he actually called out during the fight on Earth in the previous issue, and now he makes it his work to balance the karmatic scales and make sure no one has to go through what he went through. So yeah, he's not really evil per se, and in fact, Cade isn't really evil either. In fact, despite his monstrous appearance, he's actually quite sensitive. He, as we discover, has the ability to break down a person's resistance. It's what he's currently doing to Lex and what he didn't want to do to his friend Lakal. As you might have guessed, Lex thinks punishing someone for crimes they may commit is absolutely bunk and a complete and utter abuse of human rights, his human rights. The irony's not exactly lost on New Superman either, the fact that he now has to move heaven and earth to try and save Lex Luthor, a man that were he a weaker person may just leave to the dogs. Superman does manage to find out one interesting thing though, and that is that the teleportation residue left behind by Lakal and Cade is actually very similar to the one left behind by the Genetron Corporation. While the Man of Steel may not exactly be 100% sure how these two things are linked, he does end up getting a glimpse of the destroyed Earth and a portal to where Lakal and Cade are keeping Lex as the comic ends. Action Comics number 969 was decent. Again, it's mostly an origin piece for Lakal the Godslayer, and he's okay. Again, he's much like many characters in this mold. Clearly, this is all going to be part of a bigger story, and I can't wait for the reveal that eventually explains how Genetron and the fake Clark and these guys from this alien planet are all connected, but as it stands right now, this one was just decent enough. I give it a 6 out of 10.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for watching my newest video. I hope you enjoyed it, and while you're here, why not check out another video I have on offer, or maybe if you're feeling in a supportive mood, you want to like or subscribe. And if you want to support the creation of more videos just like this one, then please by all means check out the Cape Joel Patreon. on. A little bit goes a very long way, and I will see you all next time.
So, as we join the book, Superman is flying out into space in an attempt to retrieve Lex Luthor. What's interesting about this bit here is how he actually flashes back to the Lex Luthor he remembers from his Earth. The considerably more evil Lex that we all remember, and hey, a Lex who also just so happened to be born in Smallville, which is a nice little callback. When Superman finally finds Lex, he's not exactly in a great way right now. Zayd had managed to essentially break his spirit with a power nullifier, and he's not going to be flying out of here under his own power anytime soon. Even in his weakened state, however, the irony of this situation, Superman risking life and limb to save him, is not lost on old Lex. In fact, he finds the whole thing kind of hilarious. Now, Zayd and Lakal the Godslayer come to stop the breakup, but the funny thing is they don't exactly want to fight. I mean, they do end up fighting anyway, but by and large, they just want Superman to stand down so they can serve their justice. In another fun bit too, Lakal mentions that he and Zayd had actually battled General Zod before in the past, which is kind of a fun little drop there. Don't be surprised if that comes up again later at some point. When Superman refuses to back down, Lakal decides to play up the sympathy angle by showing Superman a flashback to what happened to him and his family on this very planet, how Darkseid and the Parademons came to this world to destroy it, but also take its children away to be meat in the Apocalyptian army. In a cruel bit of irony, Lakal and his wife were actually running to put their daughter on the last escape ship before they were both cut down by Darkseid. Sounds a little familiar, doesn't it? Eventually, Superman meets the Oracle woman who's in charge of this planet and the one that will be overseeing the actual trial of Lex Luthor. Superman and Lex still think this whole future crime thing is absolutely bunk, but this woman and indeed everyone who's going to be overseeing the trial are super sure that Lex will eventually use his mother box to become the new Darkseid and bring horror and destruction to the entire universe. And hey, you know what? Just maybe all these aliens, who I can assume are the last survivors of their own destroyed worlds, are just a little bit biased, because when it comes time to render their judgment, they find Lex Luthor guilty of future crime. And you know what? For a second there, Lex thinks he's just going to leave with Superman, no problem, but when all that stuff about the mother box that he had hidden away comes out, Superman changes his tune just a little bit, saying, you know what, Lex, maybe you are guilty as the comic ends. So picking up from where the last issue left off, Superman seemed to be in agreement with all the other inhabitants of this planet that had been lost to horrible genocide, and that Luthor will be guilty of committing a crime in the future. Only here's the thing though, as you might have guessed, Superman was really just playing everyone else on the planet. He firmly believes you can't punish someone for something they're going to do. Now, I know a lot of people in the comments section have said they feel that this Superman story is DC critiquing what Marvel did with Civil War 2, and while I don't think the timeline of these events really line up, it is kind of hard to deny that Jurgens manages to pull off the whole innocent until proven guilty thing much better than Bendis did. Another interesting thing about this issue is that Lex Luthor actually has narration duty, so we get to see this whole situation from his point of view. What's really compelling is his view of this Superman. He says that while him and the old Superman never exactly saw eye to eye or anything, he did eventually come to respect him. You know, they kind of had these trial by fires together, and because of it, he at least knew where he was coming from. This new Superman, no idea where he's coming from, no idea what makes him tick, and that freaks Lex Luthor out. With the help of Lex's mother box, our two heroes attempt to escape, only here's the thing, Lakal actually is pretty good with apocalyptic technology, as he should be. Darkseid killed his family after all, and because of it, he's actually able to interfere with their teleportation. This means that Lex and Superman get dropped in a backwoods savage planet complete with a red sun, which means Superman is slowly but surely losing his superpowers. Hey, anyone else just get a really pleasant flashback to those episodes of X-Men the animated series where Magneto and Xavier were trapped outside together and had to rely on one another? Being stranded isn't all bad, however. It actually gives these two men a chance to talk with one another, as Superman says he thought that, you know, given what he had been through with the Luthor on his Earth, that this Luthor was, you know, wearing the S, the symbol of the House of El, as some sort of cruel joke. Little did he think that this Lex actually had undergone a lot of change and a lot of growth from Forever Evil onward, and he actually did want to honor the S and honor the Superman of his Earth, and I think he really kind of understands that here in this issue. This leads us into a pretty compelling situation. Lakal and Zayd are coming to kill our two heroes, but Luthor, in a complete reversal of fortunes from the beginning of this arc, actually has to step in to defend Superman. So, picking up more or less from where the last issue left off, Lakal the Godslayer and his partner Zayd are in the process of trouncing Superman and Lex Luthor. This planet our heroes are trapped on comes complete with a red sun, which means Superman is unable to access his amazing abilities. Luthor isn't in top fighting shape either, as the giant Zayd is able to
to impair a person's mind. The play here is simple but incredibly effective. Our heroes will split up, draw the enemy's fire, and hope to beat them one-on-one. Once again, Lex Luthor has narration duties for the comic, and I have to say he dropped some of his best chestnuts here in this issue. How unfair his situation is and how he's actually kind of starting to worry about Superman on his own without him there to protect him. And if that wasn't cool enough, Superman most definitely impresses in this issue. It's something I think that gets lost on a lot of different comic book writers, and that is Superman doesn't need his powers to be awesome or be a hero. In fact, this very issue reminds us of what this Superman did during the storyline Convergence, how he lost his powers completely and yet still found a way to fight crime, and in the battle with Zayd, he gets very creative using his cape to blind the giant. But in a nice and very welcome twist, this finale isn't about fighting, not at all really. You see, Lekal pretty much has Lex Luthor dead to rights, but once again, Superman speaks up to kind of advocate for him. Basically, we get to see the Kryptonian play a small-town lawyer in this issue. He talks about how destiny isn't set in stone and how everyone has the right to change, and if Luthor will end up doing all these horrible things that Lekal fears, then, well, Superman will make it his responsibility to stop him. And just to sweeten the deal a little bit further, Superman allows Lekal to look into his own personal future, and apparently he's so moved by what he sees, he's allowing Lex to go. And when the two men get back to Earth, they more or less finish off their character growth for this arc. At first they didn't trust each other, but now they've come to respect each other a lot, actually. Lex believes that the guy in front of him really is a real deal Superman, someone he can most definitely trust and someone who has the best intentions for the world in mind. And even Superman himself concedes that this Lex is completely different from the one on his own Earth. This Lex has gone through things that made him change, made him become a hero in his own right, and the nice little topping on that sundae is Lex gives the old Superman's cape back to the Daily Planet and back to Perry White. So, you know, all in all, a pretty happy, feel-good ending for everyone involved. Well, that is except for when we cut back to Lekal and Zayd, who asks him, hey, why did you really let Lex go? What did you see when you looked into Superman's future? Lekal almost hilariously says, you know what? We don't gotta punish them, the future's gonna punish them for us. Alrighty then, so as we join the comic, Superman is returning to his secret fortress of solitude, the place where he keeps his most powerful technology, as well as criminals that even he himself deems too dangerous for the general public. Oh, but wouldn't you know it, his perimeter has been breached, and now he has company in the form of Steel and the very sick Lana Lang, aka Superwoman. Now, if you've been reading the Superwoman book, you would know that Lana's newfound powers, which she got shortly after the death of the New 52 Superman, are not exactly agreeing with her, and because of it, her cells are starting to break down. Stranger still is that before she passed out, it was Lana who actually told Steel where to go to find Superman. Interesting, as Superman hasn't told anyone where his new secret fortress of solitude is. It's made abundantly clear that only Superman will be able to save Lana, and I get the feeling saving her will be tied in more to the Superman Reborn story once that takes place. And believe it or not, that's pretty much all the actual quote-unquote Superman you get in this book, because the real A-plot of the story actually involves Lois Lane going undercover to try and break up a corruption ring involving city councilmen, gangsters, and dirty cops, with the help of Maggie Sawyer. It's actually a really cool little noir segment that reminds you how far Lois Lane is willing to go in order to break the case and be the best journalist she can be. Why, when the sting operation goes tits up, she even shows that she's more than capable of defending herself, what with being a military brat and also the wife of Superman, why wouldn't she be able to do these things? The one mystery, though, she can't seem to break is this extra Clark Kent that's been running around since the beginning of DC Rebirth. He seems to come and go with little to no explanation, and no one can seem to pin down where he's from. All in all, he's harmless for the most part, although occasionally he has shown to have a bit of a darker side to himself. He's definitely obsessed with Lois and is continually overstepping his boundaries with her. Lois figures that she is perhaps in a better position to unravel this guy's mystery than just about anyone else, especially because creepy Doppel Clark, oh yes, they name him in this issue, wants to invite Lois out on a date. At first she's kind of repulsed and also a little worried what her husband Superman would think, but at the same time she is a journalist and she does want to get to the truth of this matter, so she agrees as the comic winds down. Then, so picking up from where the previous issue left off, Steel is in the Fortress of Solitude right now with Superman. Lana Lang's new powers are greatly disagreeing with her, and they fear she'll die soon if Superman can't do something to help her. What I personally find interesting about all this is that for the few minutes that Lana is actually conscious, she looks at Superman and says, how can you be here now when you were already there? Which leads me to believe that she's not talking about this Superman, she's talking about the Superman that she remembers. I must also admit, Superman's plan to stabilize Lana by putting her inside inside an old Kryptonian battlesuit is actually a stroke of real genius. Because, you know, unlike Superman, she can't go into a healing coma and they just can't put her at the center of the sun or anything like that. Believe it or not, for the second issue in a row, all this dying Superwoman stuff is indeed still the B-plot. The A-plot involves Lois trying to get to the bottom of this doppelganger Clark mystery. In fact, she's so dedicated to cracking this case wide open, she's actually offered herself up to go on a date with this guy, even though he's getting more and more creepy as time goes on. First off, he shows up early and unannounced. 2, he ordered a whole limo service to drive them off to dinner. 3, he bought out the entire fancy French restaurant so they could all eat alone, and then he also brought in balloons and gifts like this was some sort of weird kids party. But the final creep cherry on the creep sundae is he gets down on one knee, pulls out a ring, and asks Lois to marry him. As you might guess, she figures this is a giant red flag and should probably leave right about now. We also soon discover, along with being creepy, Doppel-Clark does not take rejection very well. In fact, this breaks him completely and he decides to follow Lois home. It's there he just so happens to catch a glimpse of Lois having dinner with her husband and son. This further breaks Doppel-Clark's mind, although something very interesting happens. In his crazed state, he starts to say to himself that he remembers now. What exactly does he remember? Well, we don't know, but we'll have to check back when Superman Reborn starts and find out, won't we? We're taking a closer look at Superman issue number 18. Everything that's been going on with the Man of Steel, everything that's been going on in the DC universe following Rebirth all comes to a head here and now. What'll happen next? Let's hop on in together and find out. So, as we dig on into the comic, we check out the base of operations for one Mr. Oz, that mysterious all-powerful individual who has been kidnapping people from all throughout the different comics. So far, this creepy cloak dude has absolutely been on top of his game and no one's been able to challenge him. However, that all seems to have changed just recently as someone actually escaped his clutches. A person whom we soon discover has a great love and affinity for Superman. Now from there we transition on over to Kent Farm. It's Lois and Clark's anniversary and they're having a big party right now, which includes the exchanging of gifts. It's been hard for this trio trying to accumulate themselves to a new Earth and a new status quo, but overall they think they managed to have done the job just right. Their pleasant evening is shattered, however, by the appearance of the mysterious doppelganger Clark, who has been hanging out on the periphery of this book for some time now. This guy is an enigma wrapped in a mystery, wrapped in a blue suit and a pair of glasses. Stranger still, though, Crypto the super dog actually seems to recognize him. And that's not even the creepiest thing this guy does this issue. He drops off a photo album that's filled with images of Lois and Clark and the lives they lived on their previous Earth. Right on down to red trunks on Superman, in fact. But just as soon as this guy showed up, he disappeared. It's after that that the Kent family house ends up catching on fire. But this is no regular fire, it's a strange blue fire that doesn't so much burn stuff away as it makes it absolutely disappear. Poor John the Superboy ends up getting caught in the fire, and slowly but surely he too ends up phasing out of existence. As you might have guessed, Superman and Lois are absolutely mortified at the disappearance of their son, but Clark swears up and down that he will go to the ends of the Earth, track down the doppelganger Clark, and get their kid back. So then, as we join the comic, Superman and Lois Lane have gone full-on Liam Neeson in Taken to try and get their son back. Or Hugh Jackman in Prisoners, if you prefer. Or Casey Affleck in Gone Baby Gone. Or Mark Wahlberg in The Lovely Bones. Wow, when you stop and think about it, there's a lot of movies about kidnapped children I could draw upon to make a reference. They hit up the doppelganger Clark's residence only to find out that it's really eerie. For one, it's incredibly clean, like no one human lives there, and all the food is nothing but candy, as if a 6-year-old did the shopping. Just for the record, my condo looks exactly the same, but not because I'm sinister or anything, just because I'm a dude who works on the internet. Eventually our heroes do come face to face with doppelganger Clark, and the surprising thing about this though is that he's actually the one who feels insulted. Now all throughout the lead up to this storyline, we got the feeling that this doppelganger Clark was not who he seemed to be, that he had memories that couldn't possibly have been his own. It's in this issue, little by little, the facade begins to strip away and reveal the true being that exists underneath. What's surprising though is that Doppel-Clark uses his amazing power to take the form of a bunch of different Superman villains. You got your Lex Luthor, you got your Bizarro, you got your Brainiacs. Heck, even Mongol shows up, and all throughout it this guy keeps yelling at Superman to say my name, say my name. Man, you know, you gotta feel bad for all of Doppelganger Clark's neighbors right now. They hear a huge scuffle and some man just yelling say my name over and over again. Either a crime is taking place or they figure Clark Kent decided to ditch the whole news media thing and finally take up making amateur porn. In the end, though, the doppelganger Clark is revealed to be, and this is truly a stroke of genius right here, it can't be understated, the real force behind all of these events turns out to be none other than Mr. Mixiel Spitlick, or Mixelplick, or just Mixie for short. A little imp from the 5th dimension with near godlike powers who has been bedeviling Superman since the Golden Age. Now, it used to be for a while there, Superman and Mixie had themselves a rhythm. Mixie would show up, would play a bunch of tricks and pranks, sometimes dangerous, sometimes not, and Superman would have to defeat him by getting to say his name Keltipsy-Zim backwards. Only something really bad happened to Mixie, which is why we haven't seen him for so long, and why Mixie is blaming Superman now for his suffering, so much to the point that he has stolen his son and vows to play the greatest game ever, by making people actively forget that his son existed at all. Now, that's the end of the first part of the story, but Action Comics number 975 is actually a double-length issue, and the second story is penned by the totally awesome Paul Dini, a man who was a huge fan of writing Mixie over on Superman the Animated Series. Basically, this story involves Mixie telling Jonathan Kent, his captive, what happened to him and why he's been missing for all this time. It seems that during one of his outings to the main Earth to try and mess with Superman, he was captured by the mysterious green-cloaked Mr. Oz. It would seem that Oz has some very long-term plans for the Man of Steel, and he wasn't going to allow a little 5th-dimensional imp to introduce so much chaos into Superman's life and possibly jeopardize his plan. And it's right around here the story takes one hell of an unexpected turn. You see, Mixie isn't scared of Oz. He knows that Superman will come and save him. I mean, he considers him a friend. They've been having their little back and forth since the Golden Age. But when years fly by with absolutely nothing, Mixie begins to lose hope. He begins to hate and resent Superman. It wasn't fun and games for the imp anymore. He actually truly began to plot his revenge against Superman. But first things first, he had to escape, and to do that, he ended up spamming Keltipsy-Zim. After all, if the power of the word was enough to banish him to his own dimension again, surely if he said it enough times, it could banish him from his prison, which it did. But Mr. Oz would not let up, so Mixie had to get clever. He used one of his most powerful spells to rewrite his mind to make himself believe that he truly was Clark Kent. This proving why he was able to pass all of Batman's lie detector tests, because even he didn't know who he was, and he only figured it out once he saw Superman again with his family. A family that, and this is the truly sad part here, Mixie always believed himself to be part of, because again, he's a 5th-dimensional being. He remembers all iterations of Superman from the Golden Age to the cartoon to right now, and Mixie was always there. I mean, after all, Superman saves everyone. Superman can do anything. He even saves the evil people, and yet Mixie feels left out and hurt because Superman didn't try and save him. This is why he's taken his son, and this is why he'll do everything in his power to hurt Superman now. Picking up from where the last issue left off, Lois Lane has forgot about her son due to Mixie's magic, and Superman is trying desperately hard to get the imp to break the spell. Only, unlike other times these two titans have clashed, there is no game here, no rules, only revenge. Mixie opts to take Superman and Lois to the in-between of the in-between, a place outside the normal universe. A place that even Superman finally begins to note has an eerie blue vibe about it, both the blue fire that took Jonathan away as well as a bunch of blue electricity. I wonder. When was the last time Superman and blue electricity meshed? It's in this place Mixie has developed a terrifying and brutal gauntlet for Superman to run through, a twisted, candy-inspired daily planet building. Mixie says that Superboy is at the top, only if the father wants to save the son, he's going to have to fly up and get him. Here's the rub, however. The further Superman goes up the tower, the more of his memory he begins to lose. By God, it's like surfing on the internet. The longer I'm on it, the quicker I forget why I'm even here in the first place. From there, we transition on over to the limbo where John is being held, only here's the thing. John is not entirely alone. He meets two red orbs of energy that are very familiar feeling to him. Red electric energy, you don't say. You know, that reminds me of another time Superman and red electric energy mesh. These orbs, as we soon discover, are actually representative of the spirits of the new 52 incarnations of Superman and Lois Lane. Clark, along with Lois, who he absolutely refuses to leave behind, especially as her memories are being ravaged by Mixie's magic, fights his way to the top of the twisted daily planet. Only even he, despite his amazing power, starts to lose his memory. Mixie uses this chance to gloat and also give the reader a lot of important insight into what went down. He mentions how Superman was split at the beginning of the New 52. He does not say why, but he does make a point of saying he was split, and neither Superman saved him, and so because of that, everything is fair game right now. Mixie's ultimate revenge is locking Superman Superman away like he himself was locked away, only in the end we discover that Mom and Dad Super didn't have to save their son at all. He's able to save himself with a little help from that red energy. Red energy that just so happens to find new homes inside Superman and Lois Lane, in a way fusing these old 52 and new 52 versions together into one. Yep, that's right everyone, Superman just leveled up. It's Shin Superman, 100% final form Superman. Superman ascended, whatever you want to call him, he's more powerful than ever, and he's got a fancy pair of red new boots. Mixie, and I'm sure by extension the readers too, are absolutely blown away by this, and that's pretty much where Superman number 19 comes to a close. So, picking up from where the last issue left off, the red electric spirits of New 52, Lois Lane, and Superman had jumped into the bodies of the Superman and Lois that we've been dealing with all this time. At first it all seems great, they seemingly beat Mixie at his own game, a fact of which the fifth dimensional imp is not taking well at all. The only problem, and admittedly this is a pretty giant problem right here, right now, this Lois and Clark do not remember ever having a son. Heck, they don't even remember being in a relationship. They think this kid is crazy at best and under Mixie's control at the very worst. Stranger still, Mixie opts to use this opportunity to try and get the young Superboy to join him, to come away to another dimension, away from all of this. Away from the man who hurt him, and assumedly away from the force that split his father in the first place. Who is he talking about? Is he talking about Mr. Oz? Is he talking about Dr. Manhattan? I wonder. Superboy, being a hero in his own right and being mature beyond his years, of course refuses Mixie's demands. Moreover than that, he summons up the power of the electric blue spirits representing his own mother and father to blast Mixie into submission, or at the very least blast him into boredom, because it's at this point Mixie decides to abandon this dimension before it collapses in on itself. Knowing him, this is far from over, and the fifth dimensional imp will be back to make trouble for the Superman family very soon, but the real issue falls to Jonathan now, trying to make this Clark and Lois remember. It's an uphill battle to be sure, but even New 52 Clark and Lois can feel the love radiating off this kid, know it's real, and know there must be something more out there. It's because of that they open themselves up like Jonathan's parents did and welcome the blue electric spirits into themselves, in doing so completing the fusion. Now this in and of itself is a pretty huge moment, the comic basically putting down its foot and saying yes, this is the one true Superman and Lois. The legacy has been restored and then some, but wait, there's more. This colossal fusion actually has ripple effects throughout the universe. You see, as Mr. Oz puts it, yes, Mr. Oz is actually a part of this comic, he narrates the tail end of it. In fact, Superman and Lois fusing with their New 52 selves means that essentially the rest of the Superman universe fused with its old counterpart. So Perry is now back to being the Perry you always knew, Jimmy is back to being the same Jimmy you always knew, same goes for all the villains. I'm not really 100% sure how that is supposed to work, but it really opens the door for some really interesting stories down the line, I'm sure. So there you have it, the day is saved, the villain is vanquished, and the Superman family fly home with John leading the way, Super Dad giving him a pat on the back for really being the hero in this situation. So as we join the comic, we find Clark at work. No, not working on the farm, he's back at the planet as a reporter again. It seems when his personal history fused with his New 52 counterpart, everything was just kind of put back the way it was. The status quo was returned, and this job is part of it. On one hand, it's totally awesome to see Superman return to all of his friends and extended family while still having a son and still having to deal with being a superhero, but part of me was kind of enjoying Farmer Kent. Now that's not to say everything's perfect in Superman's life. Oh sure, he's happy and everything, but after his last run-in with Mixie, he just can't help but shake the feeling something horrible happened. For this, he hopes to find answers at the Fortress of Solitude, not his secret fortress he was using before, but the actual legit fortress which he's now working out of once again. Now as we soon find out, it's not just Superman who changed after the big fusion that happened in Superman Reborn. There's been a ripple effect that's been felt throughout his villains too, mainly Metallo, which admittedly I hadn't been reading a lot of New 52 Superman, but apparently he had a lot of ups and downs, went good for a second, but now basically Corbin's back to the Corbin you always knew, an evil psychotic robot with a hate boner for Superman. Corbin is met by a rather mysterious creature made entirely of lines of code who promises to rebuild him, and in return they're all going to join forces and kill Superman once and for all. Why geez, it looks like you've got the making of quite the little revenge society right here, and Metallo's not the only one. This same mysterious computer foe also hits up Blanche. Is it Blanche or Blanc? Basically that albino with all those terrifying psychic powers that this Superman Superman had fought really early on in his run and who seems to be sticking around now. Good for him, I like him, he's original. Now back over with Superman, he hopes that by using the Fortress of Solitude's crystal tech to relive his history up until this point, he can maybe find the moment that he was split, or maybe find what, is making him feel so weird right about now. Really though, this mostly just exists to help retell Superman's origin story once again and work in what's retconned, what got taken out, what's still here, etc, etc. What is new and cool though, and I absolutely take my hat off to Jurgens for this, is Superman getting to see the destruction of Krypton and what his parents went through new eyes now that he himself is a father, and he wonders aloud to himself if he would have been able to send Jonathan away if, it was the Earth to be destroyed. I'm also not gonna lie, I thought this was really effective, and I may have teared up just a little bit reading it. It's not just Superman's life that gets mentioned either. We get to see Ma and Pa Kent again. It's funny, they fused with their old counterparts, yet they're still dead. That's something of a missed opportunity. I would have brought them back. Even Lana and Pete get a mention in this book, saying that Superman first used his powers to try and save Lana, and oh, wouldn't you know it, Lex is back to being from Smallville now. And yeah, that's pretty much the end of the comic. Superman gets all emotional from reliving these moments from his past, but he doesn't necessarily find the information that he was looking for, although he does feel that he's not alone in the Fortress of Solitude. During the comic, Mongol is beating Superman to death, and he kills him. Wow, that was a pretty short storyline. Fun though. Of course none of this is true. Mongol is still dreaming thanks to the Black Mercy. If you recall the events of Trinity, that's more or less where the superheroes left him. Eradicator comes to recruit him for the new Superman Revenge Squad. How exactly Eradicator is able to speak to Mongol through the Black Mercy is beyond me. I guess he's a Kryptonian robot and he just so happens to have an app for that. Now, if you know anything about Mongol, you know he doesn't exactly play well with other shit. He doesn't even play well with members of his own family. He reluctantly agrees to join the Revenge Squad, but you can already tell he's going to be a wild card moving forward. He, Blanche, and the Eradicator get dispatched to Superman's old secret Fortress of Solitude that held a bunch of alien artifacts he deemed too dangerous for anywhere else, including the Oblivion Stone. Wow, what a pull. It's been so long now, chances are you might not actually remember what the Oblivion Stone is. It was that alien artifact they were all fighting over in the original Superman, Lois, and Clark series that this is all kind of spinning out of. What's the deal with the stone? Apparently it has the power to change a person's reality once you gather the two halves together. Now the stone isn't completely undefended. There's still those extra dimensional people that Superman was fostering in his base of operations, the Yeti looking guy and the weird woman. They try and fight to defend the stone, only they end up getting killed for all their trouble. Now on the other side of the story, we have Clark and Lois Kent house hunters in Metropolis. Yes, they've decided that the commute is just way too much from Hamilton County and they want to put down roots in the city. They know it's going to be hard on their son Superboy, but they figure this is a good way to expose him to new cultures and new ideas and, well, pretty much the world that he's going to be saving once he gets older. How exactly they managed to afford such a bitchin' high-rise condo on a fee of 2 journalists is beyond me, but hey, they got a cool new place. Superman gets the call about his secret fortress coming under attack and quickly rushes over to see what's going on. Unfortunately, he's all too late. His 2 friends are dead and his Helix robot is beaten up too. This of course all begs the question, why, if the Revenge Squad was together, did they go for the stone first and not say, oh, I don't know, attack Superman? As we discover, it was the group's seemingly de facto leader Hank Henshaw who wanted it, but the reason he wanted it, you see, that's where things get interesting. He wants it so he can become whole again. Or to put it more simply, he wanted the stone so he could become the cyborg Superman again like he used to be before the missing 10 years in DC Universe Rebirth. Now this is actually a lot to unpack here as it opens up a ton of different possibilities. If you'll remember, when Hank Henshaw was reintroduced into the comics, he was just a normal guy, an astronaut even, with no memory of ever being the cyborg Superman. Hell, they retconned it to where Supergirl's father was the cyborg Superman, but now, after Superman Reborn, he remembers. And using the stone's power, he's able to return back to being cyborg Superman and even put Mongol in his place in a great panel very reminiscent of when the character first appeared. And if this new team wasn't dangerous enough, the squad decides they need one last member to really make this group perfect, and that would be General Zod, but to do that, they're going to have to cross paths with the Suicide Squad. So, as the comic opens up, Hank Henshaw, the newly reborn cyborg Superman, is in full-on villainous Santa mode, promising the different members of the squad the rewards they'll be given once Superman is finally dead. Mongol wants to reclaim Warworld. Henshaw says he can make that happen. Blanc just wants to do his murderous art uninterrupted. Metallo and the Eradicator, they want much more simple things, but hey, revenge is a good place to start. Cyborg Superman deduces that the best way to kill Superman is to gain control of his Fortress of Solitude and all the Kryptonian technology therein. Of course, getting into the Fortress of Solitude is no easy task. For that, they're going to require a ringer, and that ringer is General Zod. Granted, getting to him is a lot easier said than done, especially now that Amanda Waller and the Suicide Squad have gotten their hooks into him. Now, back with Superman, he knows that the heat is on and that the Revenge Squad is gunning for him. Because of that, he makes sure that Lois and Jonathan are safe at their new apartment complex in Metropolis. The idea being the property is so new, no one could possibly know that they're living there yet. Then again, you figure if Superman really cared about his family's safety, he would, I don't know, maybe take them to hang out with the Justice League on the Watchtower? And I mean, it's not wholly out of the question either, because literally in the very next panel, Superman goes to the Watchtower to talk stuff out with Batman. Together they can see Belle Reve Prison, where Amanda Waller is keeping General Zod, is currently under a giant black dome. Now, I'm not currently reading Suicide Squad. It's one of the few DC Rebirth books I actually chose to drop, but it has something to do with the Black Vault, which has something to do with residual Phantom Zone energies. Batman offers to help Superman, but Clark says he has to do this on his own. All of these villains have very deep, very personal bones to pick with him, and it wouldn't be right to get anyone else involved. Even though, there's totally strength in numbers, and one-on-one, any one of these villains is a match for Superman. Maybe he should bring in some of his own running crew, but no, he's got this. Now, the first step to breaking out General Zod is actually managing to get inside Belle Reve Prison, which, like I said, is difficult because of this giant black vault dome. Also, despite being leader of the Revenge Squad, Cyborg Superman has chosen to spearhead this initiative on his own. The only problem is the deeper you go into the Black Vault, the more it turns your own memories against you, essentially bringing your worst fears to life. For Henshaw, this is being forced to relive the events of his original origin, which, hey, means he got his old origin as a Reed Richards Fantastic Four stand-in back. Superman isn't very far behind the bad guys, but he too ends up falling prey to the Black Vault. It's his visions, though, that get kinda interesting. You see, he sees a zombified version of Ma and Pa Kent, who berates Superman for not being able to save them. That's kind of interesting because, again, if Superman Reborn made everyone revert back to their old universe counterparts, why are Ma and Pa Kent still dead? And if so, or did the same things kill them? Cyborg Superman is nothing if not sure of himself. With the help of the Eradicator, he manages to escape the Black Vault himself, and while he could very easily leave Superman to be killed by his own horrible memories, he opts instead to pull the Man of Steel out so they can play happy slaps with one another. And then, once it looks like Cyborg Superman is actually getting his butt kicked, he decides, maybe it's a better idea if I throw you back into the Black Vault. Which he totally does, and as the comic winds down, more undead figures, manifesting Superman's shame of not being able to save everyone all the time, start gunning for him. So, picking up from where the last issue left off, Superman is still trapped inside the Black Vault, that strange splinter dimension that Amanda Waller uses to keep her criminals in line in Belle Reve Prison. Supes is freaking right the hell out, being tortured by the ghosts of those he couldn't save and those he fears that he may not be able to save in the future. Interestingly enough, they make a lot of reference to his parents and the night they died. I mean, so far everything else about Superman has gone back to the way it used to be pre-New 52, so I really hope that they shine a little bit more light on his parents and what went down there. Rick Flag and Waller managed to shut down the Black Vault and let Superman out. Granted, he's not doing too good right now. Sound is really bugging him for some reason, and we won't know why until the end of the issue. At first, we think it's just as simple as he's feeling some emotional scars given what's happened to him, but oh no, the actual answer is so much more complicated than that. Now, over with the bad guys, Eradicator and Cyborg Superman are making the sales pitch to General Zod to join their team. Only little did they know the fact that they're wearing House of L symbols on their chest doesn't exactly make General Zod all that pliable. Then again, he's a leader, not a follower, and I mean that quite literally. He has his own army trapped in the Phantom Zone, and that's all he cares about, getting a projector so he can get them out. Once again, Cyborg Superman tries to play devilish dealmaker and says that if General Zod is willing to join their little crusade, they're going to be breaking into the Fortress of Solitude anyway, and surely Superman has a spare projector somewhere. Zod begrudgingly agrees, saying that he'll do it, but because he wants to, not because he's following orders. The Eradicator does drop an interesting piece of information, him, though, to Zod, saying that one of the reasons he's mad with Superman is that he's polluted the Kryptonian bloodlines, leading Zod to kind of raise an eyebrow and be like, wait, what, Superman has a kid now? Superman attempts to give chase to these three before they can escape the area. Unfortunately, once he catches up with them, he has to deal with actually fighting them, which is easier said than done because it's 3-on-1 and Superman still isn't doing so hot. It's a pretty one-sided beatdown, and just to add absolute insult into total injury, it's this moment the media decides to show up in news choppers to record the proceedings of Superman getting his butt whooped. If there's one upside to the last son of Krypton having an absolute mudhole stomped in him on national television, it's that all the related Superman family of characters can see it, including Supergirl, Keenan Kong, Lex Luthor. Even his poor son John ends up seeing it on his smartphone. I think it's pretty clear what they're building up to right here, right now. A giant battle between the Superman family and the Superman Revenge Society, which, you know what, sign me up. Superman is forced to make a tactical retreat, something that Zod gloats endlessly about. He's able to fly back home to Hamilton County, but it's not an easy flight. He has to do it basically by muscle memory. And that would be because after his run-in with the Black Vault, Superman is now 100% completely blind. And it's right here on this crazy cliffhanger the comic chooses to end. Alrighty then, so as we join the comic, we once again head to Batman's moon base where the Superman Revenge Society is holding court right now. Now, all throughout this arc, we've seen dissension in the ranks grow between all these very self-interested villains, and it continues to do so here. Cyborg Superman basically has to sit them all down and give them the Wizard of Oz speech. Basically, look, if you keep following me down this yellow brick road, I promise at the end of it there'll be an Emerald City with a heart, a brain, some courage, a Phantom Zone projector, a war world, whatever you want. But to get all these prizes, they're going to have to first break into Superman's Fortress of Solitude. A plan that Henshaw seems much more interested than the other villains who simply just want to kill Superman and get it over with. You have to wonder what's really in there and what he's really after, if anything. Luckily, because this is an old Batman installation and because Bruce apparently doesn't password lock any of his shit, the bad guys have plans to the facility. Now, back over with Superman, he and his family have taken shelter inside the Fortress of Solitude. Jonathan is looking around and he just so happens to see the Kryptonian battle armor that helped Superman go into his healing coma back when he died. Dan Jurgens, who was writing Superman comics even back then, is quick to remind the reader that, yeah, that was a one-time get-out-of-jail-free card, and if Superman dies again, it won't be so easy for him to come back. Now, in the previous issue, after his run-in with the Black Vault, Superman lost use of his sight, and along with that, all of his sight-based powers, except for heat vision, which is an expulsion of power, not sight. The worst part is that none of the super-advanced medical technology at the Fortress of Solitude seems to be able to help him. Helix, Superman's little helper robot, says that perhaps what blinded him is due to material that is in the Phantom Zone. And without any material to test, Clark is pretty much stuck this way until he gets over it, if he gets over it. Personally, I like to believe there's nothing actually doing this to him and his blindness is psychosomatic. No, it's a real thing, hysterical blindness. Check it out, they did a whole episode of King of the Hill on it. Lois, knowing things are getting dangerous and that Superman isn't up to full strength, asks that maybe he should call in the Justice League for help. Superman is just about to do that too when the bad guys show up at his front door. They start making all sorts of threats and demands outside, and I find this panel absolutely hilarious because the villains actually had no idea of knowing Superman was home at the fortress and they could have just been yelling into nothing. Superman, being the brave hero and protector father that he is, opts to keep the bad guys busy while Lois and Jonathan try and escape the fortress and get to safety. Also, having a chance to come to term with his blindness and allowing the rest of his senses to settle, Superman has gone into full-on Daredevil mode when fighting the bad guys. He uses his sense of smell to get an edge on Mongol, who apparently constantly smells like a giant garbage fire, and his ears allow him to hear the mechanical Metallo, and the loudmouth Eradicator, who apparently has a problem shutting up. Superman does his very best, and he even manages to get a couple good hits in here or there, but at the end of the day, it's still 6-on-1 with the deck greatly stacked against him. Luckily, Superman has some friends in high places, and before he got invaded, he was sure to send out the call to all the other members of the Superman family, and with that, Lex Luthor, Steel, Supergirl, and Superwoman come to his aid. Oh, you know what this means now? It's gonna be one giant 6-on-6 tornado tag match with the fate of humanity hanging in the balance. Picking up from where the last issue left off, the extended members of Superman's family have all come to his aid, answering his call in his time of need. And this is good too, because Superman is blind right now and can use all the help he can get against his most terrifying villains. Right away though, this cadre of good guys runs into a bit of a problem, and that is there is no solid solid leadership on their team. Meanwhile, General Zod is, well, a general and is able to inspire his evil troops, and with the help of Blanche, the psychic is able to actually talk to his guys without having to actually say anything. Another thing you'll probably notice about Zod in this issue is his wicked new facial hair. Wow, lightning bolt goatee. If I could grow one of those, I totally would. Oh, no, wait, there's Z's. There's Z's for Zod. This issue does offer up some interesting pairings for fights. Eradicator ends up taking on Superwoman, which Robot Rock ends up winning rather easily because Superwoman is more or less made of Kryptonian energy, and that's what the Eradicator does, absorb Kryptonian energy. Keenan Khan, the Chinese Superman, gets taken out in rather embarrassing fashion by Blanche, who gets him to not hit him by reminding him that he's human and a super punch could kill him. It's hard to believe the one combatant on the good guys team who actually does good for himself is John Henry Irons, aka Steel, who's able to go punch for punch with Metallo, as the kryptonite doesn't affect him because, well, he's human. Zod knocks Superman around pretty good too, eventually discerning that, hey, Superman can't see right now and is getting around solely with his super hearing, something that Zod is able to counteract with a skill you never knew he had before, and that is super yelling to mess with our hero's hearing. With the Super Family defeated and in record time too, Zod manages to claim his prize, a Phantom Zone projector that he hopes to use to recall his army into this dimension. Of course, because the Phantom Zone is such a big place, this is going to end up being a tall order. Someone is going to have to actually go in and retrieve these soldiers and bring them out the other side. General Zod himself sure as hell isn't going to do it. He just got out of the Phantom Zone, so instead he decides to betray Cyborg, Superman, and Eradicator by sending them in first to test the waters. So, you know, if you had Zod in your pool to see who would betray the Superman Revenge Society first, there you go, you just won the jackpot. Oh, but the bad guys are far from done. They decide to add insult to injury by sending all the good guys minus Supergirl into the Phantom Zone as well, as the comic begins to wind down. Dun dun dun. Then, so picking up from where the last issue left off, Zod and the Superman Revenge Squad are gloating over their victory and the complete and utter trouncing of the extended Superman family. Of course, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. There's been dissension in the ranks since the very beginning. And considering that Zod locked away Cyborg Superman, aka the man who brought this team together in the first place in the Phantom Zone with the heroes, it's only a matter of time before this whole partnership ends up breaking down. Meanwhile, in the Phantom Zone, the timeless void wherein everyone walks around like a ghost, Superman makes one hell of an interesting discovery, and that is being thrown into the Phantom Zone the way he was. Well, it cures his blindness he's been suffering with for the last couple issues. They try and hand-wave it away by giving a Star Trek-y, teleporter-y, techno-babbly excuse, and quite honestly, I didn't buy any of it for a second. It's like the writer just said, well, Superman needs to see now, and I need to send him to the Phantom Zone, so I might as well kill two birds with one stone. Now, our heroes are not alone. Cyborg, Superman, and the Eradicator followed them inside. They're there to try and find Zod's army. Only, as you might have guessed, Henshaw isn't exactly a fan of this whole operation, and the Eradicator, who up until now had been a pretty individualistic villain, has completely drank the Zod Kool-Aid and is following his orders to the T. In fact, it would seem like the only person who actually remained loyal to Henshaw, Cyborg, Superman during this whole time was Metallo. Must be a cyborg unity thing. Being the weakest of the team, Zod dispatches Metallo very easily before turning his sights to Mongol, the next biggest hurdle to overcome. He does this by punching him so hard he goes up into space. Zod then comes under attack by the Kryptonian battle armor, piloted by Jonathan Kent. Yes, him and his mother didn't blow up in the previous issue like we all knew they didn't. The interesting thing though is John isn't piloting the mech all on his own. Oh no, he's getting helpful tips and hints from a mysterious voice in the background, a voice that has a very greenish hue to the text boxes. So it's right around here the comic is ready to reveal its big mystery surprise, and do you want to know what that is? Turns out Zod never actually had an army inside the Phantom Zone worth saving at all. Oh no, he moved heaven and earth for the sole purpose of saving his wife Ursa and his son Lord Zod. No word on Uncle Non though. Hey, you know, this is actually the first time we've seen Lord Zod in a very long time. He was a major player in the 2006 Jeff Johns Richard Donner story Last Son. He would also end up taking the name Christopher Kent at some point and was yet another mantle holder of the Nightwing identity, if you can believe it. But neither Superman or the comic mentions any of that, so more or less we're meeting Lord Zod for the first time, it would seem. Now, Supergirl, the only member of the Super Family team who didn't get sent to the Phantom Zone, ends up finding her strength and will to fight Zod some more. Then Lois and Krypto the Superdog get involved. This leaves just big enough of an opening so Superman and the Zod family can end up stumbling back through the Phantom Zone portal. The Zod family just kinda decides to leave for space even though they outnumber our heroes. Superman can't give chase because he's gotta make sure the rest of his team comes through the breach okay. He also makes the executive decision that perhaps Hank Henshaw's cyborg Superman should stay behind in the Phantom Zone as punishment for his many crimes, and I mean really what prison could hold him. As the comic winds down, we manage to check on in with the extended Zod family, who have staked out a nice little planet ripe for the picking, a planet in which they swear they will build a new Krypton on its ashes. Alrighty then, so as we join the comic, we see a haggard Superman attempting to save a submarine. Why has Superman been spreading himself so thin recently? Well, he's got a lot going on in his life. There's the big move from Hamilton County to Metropolis, plus everything that's been going on with Mr. Oz, the Revenge Society, Mr. Mxyzptlk. It's enough to tire out anyone, even Superman. To make matters worse, there's also a bunch of Civil War nonsense happening nearby. Only this isn't your regular type of warfare, as Superman discovers a good number of the combatants are being controlled through chips implanted in their bodies. And it's not even just people who are being affected by this too, even wild animals are being conscripted into the fight. All of this bloodshed turns out to be the work of the Machinist, a Jeff Johns created villain who is honestly not that old. He's been using his advanced technology to stir up wars and conflicts all over the world and then sell chips and weaponry to both sides at a tidy profit. Superman aims to stop him, but that's the problem with fighting someone who can literally upload their consciousness into any chip anywhere. It's like trying to catch smoke with your bare hands. Things get much more complicated when Superman finds out that the chip architecture belongs to none other than Lex Luthor. Despite Superman and Lex growing much closer in previous issues, Superman still is ready to believe that maybe Luthor has gone back to his old ways and that maybe he hasn't turned over a new leaf. I mean, look at that suit he's wearing. That's a bad guy suit right there. Luthor maintains that his turn to the side of the Angels is real, and in fact he's quite upset that the Machinist would steal and repurpose his chips like this. It's for all these reasons and more, Luthor suggests donning a costume and joining Superman. It'll be a team-up, if you will, two men of steel for the price of one. The two's quests end up taking them to India, where a border dispute has proved to be fertile ground for the Machinist and his evil chips. Why, in this part of the world, the opposing forces have chosen to get quite creative, chipping a bunch of elephants and using them as battering rams. Hey, fun fact about elephants, did you know in that part of the world more people die every year due to elephant attack than tiger attack? It's true, it's because when an elephant starts rampaging, ain't nothing gonna stop it. After pummeling the perturbed pachyderms, the Machinist begins to get desperate. If he's going to defeat Superman, he's going to need someone who can properly challenge them, even if that person ends up being Lex Luthor. So yeah, as the comic begins to wind down, we are promised another major smackdown between Superman and Lex Luthor, but not in the way we thought we would get it. Alrighty then, so picking up from where the last issue left off, the Machinist had used one of his chips to take control of Lex Luthor's Apocalyptian battlesuit to make him fight Superman on his behalf. Here's the funny thing though, as we find out this issue, the Machinist chips have this funny little quirk of bringing out all the anger and hate that was inside you anyway to make you act out violently, so all the horrible stuff that Luthor is saying to Superman in this issue, it might be a little bit more legit than he might have hoped it was. Another thing we apparently didn't know about Lex Luthor and his battlesuit is that he's really only been using half of its power up until now. The more he taps into it, the more he ends up absorbing Apocalyptian energy and more or less looking like Darkseid. Also, does the suit make him bigger, or is that just a weird art perspective? I know the art in this issue hasn't been awesome, but this really made me wonder. Superman takes Lex out in the cold vacuum of space, so he hopefully can't hurt anyone, including himself. However, both men end up tumbling back to Earth as Lex unloads on the Man of Steel with everything he has. This all turned out to be a genius gambit by Lex to overload his own suit's power so it would burn out the control chip inside of him. Damn, sure is lucky that worked exactly the way you thought it would and didn't, oh, I don't know, kill one or both of you. With that all dealt with, Superman is admittedly quite easily able to track down the Machinist and stop him once and for all. The two heroes end up having themselves a little heart-to-heart, and they're both a little depressed at the fact that at the end of the day, the Machinist was controlling people to wage war on one another, but not by much. Later that night, Lex returns to his laboratory to try and do a diagnostic on his war
suit. It's while looking it over he ends up discovering a strange little Z pattern carved inside it that he never noticed before. Before he can investigate any further though, Lex comes under attack by none other than the mysterious Mr. Oz, who has been hanging over all the Superman books since the DC Rebirth. Oz was of course the guy who hired the machinist in the first place and berates Lex for ever wanting to be a hero, saying it's never going to be possible for him, that it's not in his nature and that he should just quit right now. Oz then unloads a bunch of heat vision on him. Oh my, that is an interesting little addition to his arsenal. The comic ends with Lex gripping his House of L symbol while tears stream from his face. Ouch. Alrighty then, so as we join the comic, we check on in with Metallo after his run-in with the Superman Revenge Society. He's in an Argus prison right now, and we know it's an Argus prison because of that really weird looking Argus logo that looks like they totally added that in post. I can't be the only one who feels that way, right? Mr. Oz comes to him in the night, and for a second there it looks like he's going to bust the evil cyborg out. Only he doesn't. He berates Metallo for all the bad stuff he's done to Superman and then steals his kryptonite heart, which, you know, I'm no medical doctor or anything, but I'm pretty sure Corbin needs that for living. Now, over in Metropolis, it's just another average day. The Man of Steel manages to save a truck carrying important medicine earmarked for the Third World from sinking. This turns out being a much weirder case than anyone at first could have thought. For one, no one knows why someone would want to steal a truck full of important medicine, and then to really make things strange, all the people of Metropolis, who are normally pretty good and even-tempered, call for Maggie Sawyer to execute the man in the street. And just to really hit home the sinister nature of all of this, we start to see small Oz symbols appearing on people's bodies all over the world. These people with the symbols on their hand push and prod others and pretty much create a tinderbox situation all over the world. Superman, though, is none the wiser to this right now. As it stands, the only thing he's interested in is seeing his son John get a nice tour of the office where him and Lois work. It's actually a really adorable scene where we get to see little John meet Steve Lombardi for the first time. Lombardi tries to impress him, but none of it works. I also like John has little nerd glasses like his dad. Now, having moved all of his chess pieces into position, Mr. Oz is finally ready to spring his trap to reveal to Superman the true, horrible, and dark nature of mankind. Several high-profile disasters all happen very close together and have Superman running ragged. We get a giant oil tanker crash on a beach full of cute animals, a racist good old boy with a bunch of guns about to kill a bunch of migrant workers because they took his job, don't you know? And lastly, and perhaps most dishearteningly, the aid camp where Superman dropped off all that medicine from the beginning of the issue, well, it came under attack by rebels and everyone there was seemingly killed. Needless to say, Superman is pretty horrified by this turn of events, and even being the demigod superhero that he is, he can only be in one place at once, and he feels like he's not doing a good enough job responding to all of these crises. And it's right about at that moment right there when Superman is at his absolute weakest, both physically and mentally, Mr. Oz appears to him for a little powwow session. He begins to go on a whole tirade about how humanity is weak and corrupt and how they don't deserve a hero like Superman. It's in this speech he ends up betraying the fact that he himself is not human. He's also a lot more powerful than we may have first thought because he manages to teleport he and Superman back to the Fortress of Solitude. And it's right around here we eventually discover who's been under the green hood this whole time. This will be a huge spoiler, so if you care, skip ahead to the end of the video, but a lot of people have already put it together. You see, perhaps Mr. Oz's hatred of Earth stems from the fact that, well, he's the one who built the ship that sent Superman to Earth. Yep, that's right, Mr. Oz is revealed to be none other than Jor-El, seemingly back from the dead and down one eyeball. And so picking up from where the last issue left off, we discovered that the mysterious Mr. Oz, who has been making life so difficult for Superman recently, turned out to be none other than a man claiming to be his father, Jor-El. So yeah, if you were wondering, the twist was literally, Clark, I am your father. Now, Superman has all the reason in the world to believe that this is bunk. After all, it was not so long ago that Mr. Mxyzptlk pretended to be an extra Clark Kent, so he's not really ready to believe this right now. Of course, the evidence is quickly starting to pile up that this guy might actually be the real McCoy. For one, he knew exactly where to find Superman. Two, he's able to interface with Kryptonian technology, including Helix, his own creation. But Daddy Not-So-Dearest decides that perhaps the best way to make Superman see the light is to take him on a walking tour through his own memory. I mean, after all, they have the technology for this, and it's all in handy-dandy crystal form. And hey, if it seems like I'm making a lot of jokes and snide comments this issue, it's only because the rest of the comic is super not funny. You see, we actually get to visit Jor-El during the last days of Krypton, and we see he actually got into a big fight with his largest financial scientific backer, and that would be his father-in-law, Clark's grandfather on his mother's side, Lor-Van. You see, Gramps thought that Jor-El was embarrassing the family with his crazy Doomsday poppycock. In fact, the dude was so quick to try and wash his hands of the whole thing, he went out of his way to destroy a bunch of plans that Jor-El had put together to build a space armada to ferry the Kryptonians away from the exploding planet. Now, obviously, we know the rest of the story. Jor-El sends his son away just as the planet is about to explode, but as Krypton burns all around him, he is enveloped in a mysterious blue light, not unlike the sort of light belonging to a certain Dr. Manhattan fellow. Jor-El ends up getting himself violently transported across the universe, eventually finding his way to Earth in a particularly war-torn region of Africa. A kindly family ends up taking in the horribly injured and now horribly disfigured Jor-El, but due to the actions of a particularly brutal warlord, they need to keep him underground and out of sight, which means he doesn't end up absorbing a lot of yellow sunlight while on Earth. It would seem that this warlord's preferred method of violence is actually controlling the food supply in this small community, meaning that a lot of people go hungry and in some cases even starve to death. After Jor-El is healed, he feels that it's only right to repay these people for saving his life by stealing them a little food from the warlord's camp. I mean, really, what could go wrong? A lot, as we find out. You see, the kid gets a taste for food, and because of that, he opts to trade some of the kryptonite that his dad pulled out of Jor-El for more food. The general catches wind of this and ends up tossing the whole house, even forcing the kid to gun down his own parents. Yeesh. Now, whether by fate or by the will of the mysterious blue man, Jor-El's superhuman powers choose this exact moment to activate, and he ends up flash frying the warlord and his goons. And hey, if this wasn't a feel bad enough story yet, in his absolute terror, the kid decides to take a couple pot shots at Jor-El. Granted, they bounce off because, well, he's super. This moment would end up having a major effect on Jor-El's psyche. But if that situation wasn't enough to make him lose all faith in humanity, the mysterious entity decides to take it one step further, blasting him to a room where he's forced to watch all of history's greatest atrocities a la Clockwork Orange. It's because of all these reasons and more, Jor-El now feels that the planet Earth does not deserve his son Superman as their savior. They will never change their ways, and they are doomed to utter destruction, much like Krypton was. For they too are racked with the same greed, cruelty, corruption, and hubris, and that the only right thing for a father to do would be to whisk his son away from this planet before it ends up costing him his life as well as the comic ends.
Alrighty then, so as we join the comic, we get to check on in with Lois and John at the Daily Planet. A crazy wingnut with a bomb and a gun ends up coming in screaming about fake news. No, not because he read some horrible conspiracy theories online or anything. He's actually a follower of Mr. Oz. You can tell because he has a tattoo, as do a lot of people in this story. Lois, showing what a true hero she is in her own right, tries to calm the dude down, saying that as long as he lets everyone go, she'll write his story for him. Poor Lombardi ends up getting shot though. Worse still, little Superboy sees all of this go down, and even though he totally has the power to stop it, he can't do it without revealing who he is to everyone. This planet attack is just the newest in a long line of masterminded atrocities put together by Jor-El to try and make his son lose faith in humanity. You see, Superman is willing to concede that maybe perhaps Mr. Oz is his father, but that there's no way in hell he could ever leave Earth behind, not when he's always been this great symbol of hope. In fact, he kind of leaves the Jor-El problem on the back burner, as he must go to a war zone to stop a bunch of chemical weapons from being introduced and killing millions. But with Superman so busy overseas, who could possibly save Lois? Well, we think it's Superboy who's going to get the job done at first, only no, Jor-El is actually playing multiple sides of this. Having failed to turn his son Superman, Jor-El is now trying to ingratiate himself to Lois, only she's a lot smarter than this. She's never met Jor-El before, but even she knows that this guy is acting in complete contradiction to everything she's ever heard Clark say about him. Having struck out twice now with the two people he was trying to turn to his side, Jor-El decides to go for another tactic, and that is, hey, maybe meet his grandson for the first time. As you might have guessed, John's in a bit of a vulnerable place right now. He feels bad that he wasn't able to use his powers the way he wanted to try and save his mother and the people at the planet, and Jor-El, smart guy that he is, plays on these fears. He once again goes on to his big spiel about the evils of humanity, and wouldn't it be so much better if John and his family could go somewhere where they wouldn't be afraid to use their powers out in public. Well, wouldn't you know it, Grandpa is working on just that thing, a whole new planet for Superman and his family, a world of new Krypton, if you will. Alrighty then, so as we join the comic, we find Superman still rushing around the globe trying to put a stop to a series of crises that have been masterminded by his father Jor-El to try and prove to him the evil of mankind. Chiefly among them a chemical weapon attack in a poor African nation. Superman opts to deal with this problem in probably the most Supermanish way imaginable. He grabs both the head of the corrupt government and the head of the brutal rebel group and forces them to sit down and come to a compromise. The president says that the rebels are unclean peasants undeserving of mercy, and the rebel leader says that the president is a corrupt fat cat who hoards all the resources from everyone else. Superman basically says, hey, the two of you start being fair to each other right now, or so help me, I'm coming back. Now back over with Jor-El, he's taken in young Jonathan Kent, the Superboy. Grandpa starts to fill the young boy's head about plans for a brand new planet, a place called Bliss, wherein everyone with powers could live in absolute harmony and not have to hide themselves and their abilities like John is. Understandably, Superboy thinks this is a good idea and doesn't get a bad guy vibe off Jor-El right away. That is, of course, until he starts slagging off the human race and saying that Superman will never be able to save them from themselves. And that if John was to stay and take up the Superman mantle, he would just be inheriting a losing battle. Not just because the human race is genuinely kinda crappy, but oh no, Jor-El says he has the inside track on something much worse, something much more terrible that's coming for Earth. Oh damn, he's talking about Dr. Manhattan and the Watchmen, isn't he? Oh wow, that's cool. Now back in Metropolis, Mr. Oz's most loyal followers are ready to pull off yet another chemical weapon attack, only this time it'll be right in the heart of the city where it will kill the most amount of people. Superman is close enough to put all this to an end before they can actually pull anything off, but he and the reader are left with the distinct feeling that Mr. Oz didn't really push these people that hard into their acts of violence. Now while this is going on, Lois has desperately been trying to get in contact with Superman, so much to the point that she took Jimmy Olsen's special signaler watch. They both compare notes about Jor-El and about everything else that's currently going on. It's at that moment the evil Kryptonian chooses to make a reappearance with John in tow. As you might have guessed, Superman is pretty ticked off at the idea of yet another supervillain trying to fill his son's head with evil thoughts and turn him against his family. And in fact, as the comic winds down, as Superman is about ready to throw a punch at Jor-El, John ends up getting in the way, telling them not to fight one another.
So, picking up from where the last issue left off, Jor-El had come to Superman and Lois with Jonathan in tow. Apparently, he'd been able to convince the young Superboy about the coming destruction of Earth. This really ticks off Superman, who, as you can understand, has had really about it up to here right now with evil villains trying to seduce his son to the dark side. What's compelling, though, is that through all of this, Jor-El says the work he's done as Mr. Oz was never actually evil. He never forced anyone to do any bad things in his name. He only put normal, regular, everyday people in situations where they could choose between good and evil, and sadly more chose evil than good. In a last-ditch effort to truly try and make Superman understand what he's been trying to accomplish, Jor-El transports Superman to his tower hideout, a strange otherworldly place gifted to him by his master, who's probably Dr. Manhattan, but we don't know that for sure just yet. What we do know is that this weird tower prison exists outside Hypertime. It's also a place where lost souls kind of congregate. Superman still refuses to believe that this guy could be his father, and as such decides to smack him in the chops, only when he does so, he notes that it feels a lot like punching another Kryptonian. It's right around here too Jor-El decides he's had enough of Superman being such a belligerent child, and that if he's not going to listen to reason, well, Daddy is going to have to deliver a little bit of tough love. He opts to do this by pulling out one last terrifying trump card from his arsenal, and that is kryptonite-laced laser vision. Yeah, it seems that the explosion on Krypton actually managed to give Jor-El some new abilities. He took the shards of his dead planet inside him, and because of that, he's able to use it like
like a weapon. The two continue to fight their way around the tower, and Superman sees some rather disturbing sights, one being the prison where Mr. Mxyzptlk was being held, once again confirming that this guy really is his father and really is the evil puppet master who's been messing with his life the last couple years. Superman especially doesn't know how to process things like Metallo's kryptonite heart or Doomsday in bondage. Jor-El says that everything he's done is to try and protect his son from those who would want to hurt him most. It's right around this time Superman decides to make one hell of a gamble. He grabs that staff that Jor-El has been carrying around with him. The staff has been exhibiting some strange otherworldly energy signatures, and Jor-El indeed confirms that it was a gift from his master, both to power him up but to also keep him under boot. You see, the kryptonite that's in Jor-El's body is very close to his brain, and it's slowly killing him. The staff allows him to manage the pain and the sickness. But when Superman breaks it, he starts getting weak all over again, but at the same time he manages to shake off a little bit of his master, assumedly Dr. Manhattan's control. He tries to apologize for what he's done, saying that he's sorry, that he knows deep down his son will make the right choice, and then he disappears in a giant blue light. Not at all unlike how Batman lost his father in the Button storyline. He thinks that was intentional. Superman returns to his family, saying that he's won the battle, but the war to come will almost certainly be 100 times worse. He also doesn't believe Jor-El is dead, but that he still needs to be saved wherever he is, both from himself and from other evil forces. As the comic winds down, Lois asks her husband if Jor-El was correct, if the world truly is as screwed as he believes, and if there is anything they can do about it. Superman only says that he has work to do and then leaves.
Alrighty then, so as we open up the comic, Superman is at the Fortress of Solitude. He's still reeling from the revelation that Mr. Oz, a villain who's been manipulating so much of his life up until now, was actually his father. He doesn't want it to be true, but all the evidence is unavoidable. He's also trying to scrub Jor-El's control from the Fortress of Solitude and even his little robot buddy Helix. It's Batman of all people who comes to comfort Superman, and you really wouldn't think of Batman as a comforting force, but in this situation he absolutely knows what Superman is going through. You see, Bruce too had a run-in with a more twisted evil version of his own father just recently in the pages of The Button. It's for all these reasons and more, Batman is certain that this is all part of some bigger, more sinister conspiracy against the heroes of the DC Universe, but Superman has no time to worry about this right now as he's called away on important business. Want to know more? Go read Doomsday Clock. It would also seem that the life of Clark Kent is suffering due to all the craziness that's happening in the life of Superman right now. Lois has been covering for her husband at work with Perry, but she's not sure how much longer she can do it. Superman is definitely a man on a mission at this point, and as such he's enlisted the help of Green Lantern Hal Jordan, because, well, the Green Lanterns are supposed to protect different sectors of space, including the one Krypton was on, and Superman is hoping that Tomar-Ray has some footage of Krypton exploding. They check the Lantern archives, but everyone involved is shocked to find out that the video footage of Krypton exploding is corrupted by an external force. And no, I don't mean the Guardians forgot to update to the newest version of Norton. No, I mean like literally someone corrupted time. Superman now knows that he's essentially through the looking glass, and that if he wants to get to the bottom of this mystery once and for all, he's going to have to do something a little bit crazy, so he bids farewell to Lois and John for a little bit, before finally hitting up the Justice League Watchtower, aka the place that the Flash keeps his cosmic treadmill, a device that allows anyone fast enough to traverse the sea of hypertime. Superman hopes to use it to travel right back to the exact moment of Krypton's destruction and finally learn once and for all if Mr. Oz is truly his father, and if so, if there's anything he can do to stop it from happening. But hey, like any good time travel narrative in the DC universe, you can't have one without the inclusion of good old Booster Gold, everyone's favorite time traveling sometimes superhero. He shows up seconds too late to stop Superman from what he says will be causing a catastrophic mistake. Alrighty then, so as the comic opens up, Booster Gold, time-traveling superhero and all-round lovable loser, is having himself a conversation with his little robot assistant, Skeets. You see, they've been working an important case in the time stream right now, trying to track down the person or persons responsible for doctoring history since the DC Rebirth started. If you couldn't tell, that's been a giant bust so far. They were also supposed to stop Superman from using Flash's cosmic treadmill to travel back in time, but hey, they dropped the ball on that one too, so the salt is really deep in the wound now. Furthermore, it doesn't seem like the Flash actually knows who Booster Gold is, attacking him right away, assuming him to be some sort of supervillain trying to use the cosmic treadmill for his own sinister means. Which is really weird, because as we find out here in this very same issue, Lombard over at the Daily Planet is a huge fan of Booster Gold? What? So, where exactly did Superman go? Well, after he took the treadmill, he began to ride the waves of hyper time, which is always something of a crapshoot, isn't it? It's on his journey the Man of Steel gets snippets of pasts that may have been, or that never were. Again, hyper time is weird like that. When it's all said and done, however, Superman is ultimately plopped right out on Krypton before its ultimate destruction, but it all feels kinda weird, kinda off. This sentiment is further echoed by Booster Gold, who manages to get a bead on where exactly Superman is. He has to go and stop him from possibly ruining the future, even though he is Superman, even though he does always have the best of intentions in mind. This is some real butterfly effect chaos theory stuff going on here. And Superman slowly but surely begins to get that memo too, because as he starts walking around Krypton, he sees a fully functional spaceport, even though Krypton was really against space travel. Or at least he had always thought they were after shooting down his father Jor-El's space arc program to save their society. This situation only serves to get stranger for Superman when he observes his father Jor-El walking down the street completely casually with none other than General Zod. But they weren't friends, were they? At least Superman doesn't think they were. It's here Booster finally shows up to collect Superman, but wouldn't you know it, that big gold bumbling buffoon just happened to call down the wrath of every security guard on Krypton. And this isn't one of those situations where Superman can just fly them out of there or use his invulnerability to his advantage. Oh no, this is Krypton they're on, complete with a red sun, which means Superman is totally powerless as the comic ends. Alrighty then, so in the previous issue, Superman had used the cosmic treadmill to travel back to Krypton and try and pinpoint the exact moment his father Jor-El was kidnapped from the timeline by Dr. Manhattan. Of course, as with most stories about superheroes and time travel, this ended up blowing up in his face almost instantly, taking him to a possible alternate Krypton where Jor-El and Zod worked side by side to try and save the planet through a series of space arcs. Booster attempts to explain to Superman that where they are right now is kind of like a broken piece of glass falling off a mirror, and now time is trying to fill in the blanks even if all the facts aren't 100% right. And as with every other good piece of time travel media, we also need a ticking clock in this story. If our heroes don't manage to get back to the present, and soon time will harden and this will become history. Obviously, when General Zod sees that some intruders from off-world are trying to interfere with his plans, he sends the Eradicators after them. But not before dropping a fun little reference to Black Zero. Also, Jor-El is pretty freaked out at the idea that one of these guys running around has the House of El symbol on him. Together, Superman and Booster manage to fight their way through the Eradicators, Booster doing most of the hard work as Superman, being so far away from Earth's yellow sun, has been rendered more or less human. Why, just to show how important Booster is to this issue, he even gets narration duty of all things. Now back on Earth and in the present, in a hard-working B-plot, Lois and John are trying to figure out what became of General Sam Lane. As per the General's MO, he got caught illegally trying to topple a democratically elected government, and as such is being held prisoner with plans to be executed on television. At first, Lois tries to do this by the book and get her father back via pressuring some other generals, but they've disavowed her father's work, and as such, it looks like her and John are gonna have to deal with this on their own. Now back with Superman and Booster, they just narrowly manage to get back to Booster's time ship. They try and make it back to the present, but wouldn't you know it, they have a stowaway in the form of an Eradicator. And hey, if that wasn't a stressful enough situation, Superman is forced to see how time in this place would have managed to progress had Jor-El and Zod managed to pull off their plan of saving Krypton from its destruction. It's all pretty heavy stuff for Superman. He sees a sister he could have had, a wife and child he could have had in another time, in another place. He might not have become a superhero, but he became a very influential person leading the planet of Krypton into the future. And speaking of future, our heroes once again manage to overshoot their destination of modern day and end up jumping forward 25 years into the future. This is really bad, but it's even worse because they brought a killer Eradicator along with them. You know this is only going to do horrible things to the timeline, right? And also remind me a lot of Terminator. Alrighty then, so as we join the comic, our two heroes are in the future. Not just any future, mind you, Booster Gold's own personal future, the one he tried to escape to find fame and stardom in the past. Supes and Booster aren't alone, by the way, either. They brought a very unwelcome stowaway with them from their last adventure on Krypton, an honest-to-goodness Eradicator. Of course, it seems no one told this mechanical monstrosity that old human adage, ass, cash, or grass, nobody rides for free. Luckily, Superman is much more helpful in this issue, what with being back on Earth and near Earth's yellow sun. Granted, Booster Gold still takes the majority of narration duty in this issue. Now, as you might have guessed, all this titanic commotion alerts the authorities that already have a bone to pick with Booster, what with stealing his time sphere and everything. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this story's hard-working B-plot. Lois sneaks aboard a military transport in an attempt to try and save her father before he gets executed in a foreign nation. She told John the Superboy he couldn't come, so obviously he ends up stowing away on this stowaway mission without his mother's knowledge. Now, Booster ends up getting himself caught by the local authorities, and we discover one of the big reasons he never wanted to come back to the future again wasn't only because he was a wanted man, but because he never wanted to face his shitty father. Surprisingly, Superman isn't actually 100% sure that he should save Booster. One, he's pretty upset with him for stopping him from learning the truth about his father on Krypton, and also he figures, hey, he's a criminal, right? He's facing justice. It's Skeets, Booster's little robot buddy, who has to get the Man of Steel up to speed on everything that's happened in Booster's life and how it caused him to take the roads that he did, how his father was abusive, that he only threw his college sports prospects so he could help his sick mother. This all seems to be enough to move Superman into action, and not a moment too soon either, because Daddy Not-So-Dearest stole a gun from a guard and was ready to stage an escape. Superman, now being a father himself, thinks that he would hate that his own son would hate him so much that he would leave the time period and never come back, and as such agrees to help Booster, and even facilitates a reunion between Booster and his mom. Aw, isn't that sweet. Now, as the comic winds down, our heroes make ready to return to the present, only once again there seems to be a malfunction with their device and they end up flying God only knows where. When they, however, do get out, though, they discover that this world is vastly different than the one they left. This world is under the foot of General Zod. Uh-oh. Yeah, well, this is different. If you've been following along, you'll know the B story in this story arc has involved Lois Lane attempting to save her father, General Sam Lane, from getting executed in a foreign nation. Only in this issue, the story leads. Turns out that Lois has actually been to this country once before. She helped the populace battle for journalistic rights, and she even managed to make friends and important contacts with the local religious order. I think they're nuns, or at least whatever this place's version of nuns are. John the Superboy is there too, following his mother from afar, and you think for a second he's gonna jump in to save her, but nope, she actually has this under control. Truly, she is her father's daughter now. But hey, what's going on with Superman and Booster Gold? Well, at the end of the last issue, they had ended up falling through time once again, and now they're not exactly sure where they are. What they do know for sure, though, is that this planet is ruled by General Zod and his family. Skeets, the friendly robot pal and walking Wikipedia page, manages to fill in our heroes, and by extension the reader, that this is the planet that General Zod had run off to after he sprung his family from the Phantom Zone. They ended up taking the place over very easily and enslaving the local populace. If that wasn't bad enough, they also have a ready-made army of Eradicator robots to do their bidding. And these very same killer robots had been giving Superman a hard time in the last issue because he was cut off from Earth's yellow sun, but now that his batteries have finally had a chance to recharge, he can cut through them like they were nothing. It would seem that once again Booster's time ship is broken. Seriously, this thing breaks every time he's used it in this story. What is it made of? Cardboard and chewing gum? And oh, you guessed it, if they want to fix it, they're going to have to go deeper into General Zod's operation to get the materials they need. Admittedly, their plan to get inside the city is pretty clever. Skeets uploads itself into the body of one of the downed Eradicator robots, and Superman and Booster Gold pretend like they're prisoners. And you know what? They probably would have gotten away with this gamble too if it wasn't for that meddling Eradicator, by which I mean the real Eradicator. You know, he ran off with Zod at the end of a previous arc, and he's still alive because robots don't age. They fight for a little bit, Superman having defeated the Eradicator previously. Now, the real problem, though, comes in the form of Lord Zod. Yep, that's right, General Zod's son, all grown up and ready for some revenge on Superman. For some reason, the comic treats this like it's some big, exciting reveal, even though he's literally on the cover knocking Superman around, so I don't know what I'm supposed to be surprised about. Either way, though, that's where the comic ends.
So, picking up from where the last comic left off, Superman is duking out with General Zod's son, Lord Zod. You know, pre-New 52, these two actually had a heck of a shared
military history that seems to continue to go unmentioned, which is weird considering how much of Superman's history has made it into canon once again. Superman admits that the kid is pretty strong, but he's probably not used to battling someone like him who can actually defend himself in a fight. Damn millennial Kryptonians, am I right there, Superman? It's a miracle this guy even looked up from his phone long enough to hit you with heat vision. Of course, if our hero could win so easily, then this would be a short comic, wouldn't it? Superman ends up getting blindsided by the appearance of Old Man Zod, who despite being gray is just as strong as Superman is now. I guess Kryptonian 80 is like the new human 40. Now back on Earth, Lois Lane is still trying to spring her dad from military prison. She gets caught by some guards, but luckily she's not the only one who wants to see the general go free. He made some friends with the local rebels. Oh good. You see, as the reader, now we don't have to feel bad about Sam Lane illegally toppling a foreign government because they totally wanted him to topple it. This is actually a pretty huge moment too, because John Kent the Superboy comes face to face with his granddad for the very first time. Keep in mind somehow General Sam Lane, who's always plugged into the goings-on everywhere in the world, still doesn't actually know Clark is Superman or that his grandkid is half alien. Now, back in the future in space, the Zod family lashes Booster Gold and Superman to a cross with kryptonite bands. Wait, Zod actually kept the one thing that could hurt him within arm's reach of the alien race that he's subjugating? Geez, he must really have broken these poor guys' spirits if they don't want to use it on him. Zod says that he's going to make an example out of the heroes and execute them publicly, not just because he's an evil dickweed, but because he still holds a major grudge against Superman for stealing his family away from him and locking them in the Phantom Zone for all those years. He also says that when he's done, he's going to help himself to the hero's time machine so he can go and wreck history because, well, why not? That's a pretty dire situation, especially when the entire Zod family hits Superman with heat vision. Now back on Earth, things aren't exactly much better. Lois and her dad are ready to make a run to freedom only to be blasted by mortar fire, and that right there is where the comic decides to end.
So, if you'll recall, in the previous issue, our heroes were lashed to a cross with kryptonite bands and were getting pelted to death with heat vision. Of course, what the bad guys seem to forget is that it's not just Superman they're dealing with here, it's also Booster Gold, who is not incapacitated by kryptonite. He also has his robot buddy Skeets in the crowd. Skeets ends up pulling his weight in a major way by taking control of a bunch of the Eradicator robots that are standing guard, and man, I really noticed just how much I said Skeets there. A skeet indeed. Superman is free, and as such, he's ready to take the fight to the Zod family. Once again, his conversation he has with Lord Zod is kind of interesting. He's mad at him, almost like he thinks he can do better, which would imply that they may have had some sort of pre-existing relationship, but we just don't know. This battle ends up leading to one hell of a standoff. Booster Gold managed to get the drop on Zod with a shard of kryptonite and threatens that if the other Zods don't let Superman go, he'll kill the old man. What no one was expecting, though, is that, oh yeah, Lord Zod was raised by General Zod and as such is a cold-hearted SOB who would rather see his father die because, hey, he was just gonna overthrow him eventually anyway. Ultimately, though, none of this matters. Our heroes manage to escape in Booster Gold's time machine, but they can't head home just yet. After all, Superman still hasn't got what he wanted when this adventure started so many issues ago. He wants to go back to the exact moment of Krypton's destruction so he can confirm once and for all that Mr. Oz is indeed his father, Jor-El, which, if you've been reading the Superman book, you know he already confirmed that. Which, once again, makes me think this story is supposed to be shorter. Booster Gold agrees, after all, Superman helped him out with his familial problem, so it's only right to pay him back here. Plus, he's gonna need Big Blue to go to bat for him when they talk to the Flash later about using his cosmic treadmill. Now, when Booster and Superman do manage to return to the present, they hear over their radio that, wouldn't you know it, your family has all been murdered in a foreign nation. Oops. Man, you know, if only you had access to some manner of time machine where you could go back 30 seconds and save them before any of that happened. Oh wait, you totally do, and Booster Gold is absolutely game for this? Even though this whole story started with Booster Gold worrying about the effects Superman might have if he affected the time stream, well, it's nice to know we've learned pretty much nothing. Ultimately, Superman is able to travel back just far enough in time to stop the mortar from killing his family. Lois, John, and Sam Lane celebrate totally not being dead, and I mean, who wouldn't? As the comic winds down, we have Flash freaking out on Superman and Booster Gold for using his cosmic treadmill. Don't you know the horrible things you could do to time? Yes, Barry, we certainly do. Flashpoint. And that right there is where the comic ends. So that. Alrighty then, so as the comic opens up, John Kent the Superboy is incredibly excited to finally be
getting a visit from his grandfather, Lois's dad, General Sam Lane. This is huge because, well, it's never happened before. In fact, Superboy only met his granddad when he and his mom saved him from a military prison in the previous arc. And you know John is a moral, upstanding kid because he doesn't even bring up to his granddad all the back Christmas and birthday presents he owes him. Now, while all this is going on, Superman is up in space dealing with a meteor threat that was brought to his attention by Star Labs. This turns out to be an Armageddon-level style threat, not a Deep Impact level style threat, which means Superman just can't punch it into pieces, he's going to have to take it apart piece by piece with his heat vision. It's either that or call Ben Affleck to come and deal with it, and I don't think that's going to be happening anytime soon. It's while taking apart the giant space rock that Clark discovers this meteor is made of a very interesting type of alien alloy, something very strong, something very resilient, and it gives him a great idea. Now back on Earth, the sweet reunion of father and daughter quickly turns sour as the topic of politics rolls around. Happens in every family, am I right? But I'm talking more about the politics of Superman. Lois and John, as you might have guessed, are pretty huge fans of Superman and all the good work he does for the world, while Sam Lane, on the other hand, is ever the paranoid human being. It also doesn't help that the last time Lois and Sam stopped talking to each other was after Lois wrote a big expose on a bunch of Black Ops missions that Sam Lane was running. Lois says that it was her duty as a journalist to make sure people knew what their government was doing, while Sam, on the other hand, feels America, fuck yeah! Now back at the Fortress of Solitude, Superman has decided to try and rectify a mistake he feels he's let go for way too long, and that is how he's been using the Phantom Zone. You'll recall in the previous arc he realized how messed up Lord Zod, General Zod's son, was for spending all those years in the twisted torture realm that is the Phantom Zone. He says that it was always meant as an imperfect solution to the problem of villains who were far too powerful to be taken to regular prison, like case in point, the cyborg Superman Hank Henshaw. Superman opines that Henshaw wasn't always bad, his mind was warped by tragedy and science, and maybe, just maybe, he could actually help him out instead of locking him up. Cause, I mean, you know, was that not basically what Mr. Oz was doing to all of his prisoners, and isn't Superman gonna at least try and be better than the dude who turned out to actually be his father? To work on rehabilitating Henshaw, Superman has created a brand new prison building out of that meteor metal from before. This means he can't break out. But he also uses some of the Kryptonian crystal tech so Henshaw can relive his happiest memories back when he was a human, if only for a little bit, in hopes that, you know, this will maybe make him see the error of his ways and make him see the light again. And speaking of seeing the light, that's exactly what Superman tries to do at home by getting his father-in-law and his wife to forgive each other and start fresh. If not for themselves, then for Jonathan, who could really use it at this point in his life. They'll not tell him about their super exploits, though. No. That is a conversation for another awkward family dinner.
We are taking a closer look at Action Comics number 1000, a landmark watershed moment in the history of the Man of Steel, complete with about a dozen truly amazing variant covers, some of which I'm showing you right now. I'm a fan of the Clay Man cover myself, that's the one I got. Now, this big anniversary issue is also an anthology story wherein some of the best and brightest writers and artists have all shown up to, you know, do their part to mark the major Superman occasion. I'm not going to cover every story, but I'll cover what I feel are the most important ones and just the ones I liked. First up, we have a story from Dan Jurgens, which is fitting because this is his book after all. We see Superman banish a group of aliens who are going to try and invade Earth on the same day the people of Metropolis are throwing a giant Superman-themed celebration. Clark doesn't want to go because he hates being the center of attention, but slowly but surely, when people start telling their stories about how the Big Blue Boy Scout touched their lives, in many cases saved their lives completely, he starts to warm up to the whole thing. Superboy John Kent is especially taken with the story of an ex-con that his dad helped get back on track just by listening to him all the times he busted him for petty crimes. In the end, Superman believes that the city is under attack and flies away to try and save it, only for Wonder Woman to meet him off at the pass and say, no worries, the Justice League had this one. In fact, they had it all day repelling the aliens. You see, the League wanted to thank Superman for all the good work he does for them and everyone else, and so they had Martian Manhunter block his senses so he wouldn't know about the impending doom, so, you know, he could just have a day to himself. And you know what? Then all the other heroes show up to honor Superman. Even Deathstroke's happy for him. Also, yeah, why is Deathstroke there, and why is Deathstroke happy for Superman? The next story I'll talk about comes from Peter J. Tomasi, which you know is pretty fitting considering that his own Superman run is ending today also. This is something of a time-traveling epic wherein Vandal Savage weaponizes hypertime and sends Superman on a journey through some of the greatest moments of his career. This is also an opportunity for Patrick Gleason to show what an amazing artistic chameleon he is, rendering some of Superman's greatest moments. We see him fighting gangsters, stopping trains, duking it out with supervillains, and every image itself is an awesome reference. In the end, Superman defeats Vandal Savage, gets home, and everyone's super happy for him. Now, the next story is probably my favorite. It might also be the shortest and the most simple. It's called The Car, and it tells the story of the gangster who was driving the famous car that Superman is holding up on the cover of Action Comics #1. Superman comes to the guy in his wonderfully retro costume and says that he's at a fork in the road right now, and only he can decide what direction his life will take. Superman hopes that he'll mend his ways in soon, if only so he doesn't have to hoist him over his head again. Pretty good trade, if you ask me. Now, Scott Snyder has a story in this book too. Surprisingly, it chooses to shine a light on the boyhood relationship of Lex Luthor and young Clark Kent. Lex and Superman also take something of a trip through time, and we're told of a story when in boy Clark Kent actually saved boy Lex Luthor from blowing himself up when doing a dangerous experiment in Smallville. Tom King has a story in his collection, and brace yourself, I actually enjoyed this one. It's a wonderfully outside-the-box story wherein a much older Superman returns to Earth to visit the grave of his parents. Did I mention he does so on the day that Earth is going to be destroyed? All life is seemingly dead on the planet, and this is just Superman honoring his heritage. But of course, the big daddy of them all, the one that I'm sure everyone is the most interested in, and the one that I was alluding to in the title of this video, I'm talking about Brian Michael Bendis' addition to Superman. His story is called The Truth, and it opens up with Superman getting his ass kicked all across Metropolis. Two diner waitresses pull our hero out of the rubble, and all they can do is talk about his red trunks. Oh yeah, those are back now, and this is the first story to actually make reference to it. One of the ladies loves the trunks, the other one not so much, so you know, pretty much the fan base as it stands right now. Now, who could possibly be so powerful as to manhandle Superman? Well, it's revealed to be this horrifying alien monstrosity here. He goes by the name Rogol Zar? I think I'm saying that right. It's probably not a good idea to have your big new premier villain have a name that I trip over, but for simplicity's sake, let's just call him Zar from here on out. Zar, as we discover, has come to Earth to not only pick a fight with Superman, but Kara the Supergirl as well. In fact, Zar calls her Superman's cousin sister. Oh man, I don't know from what part of Kansas he thinks they hail, but that ain't right. Yeah, Zar hates all Kryptonians, and he vows to cleanse them all off the face of the universe single-handedly. Why, he even says that he knew Jor-El before the destruction of Krypton. And that's because, wait for it, Zar was the one who destroyed Krypton. Dun dun dun! And if that sounds a lot like Superman Earth 1 to you, well, you're not alone. So yeah, that was Action Comics number 1000, everybody. It was a mixed bag, but ultimately I would say I enjoyed pretty much everything I read from this. The art was absolutely on point. It's clear they spared no expense. And I feel that a lot of the images here are going to live with us for a long time now. It was also pretty clever to have Jurgens open the book and Bendis close it, kind of in a torch-passing moment. How do I feel about where he seems to be taking the story? You know, it's got its pros and its cons. I don't know if we really needed to retcon Krypton's history so soon after we had a whole story where Superman traveled back in time to see its destruction, but, you know, Bendis gonna Bendis, so I guess we just have to live with it for now. Overall, while not perfect, I thought it was a very satisfactory Centennial issue, some really good stories in here.
We're taking a closer look at Action Comics Special Issue number 1. Before Dan Jurgens closes the page on the Man of Steel, we first need to find out whatever became of Lex Luthor. Well, let's hop on in together and find out. Okay then, so as we join the book, someone has broken into the Fortress of Solitude, not an easy feat. Their outline is all too familiar. They look like big, bald, and evil himself, Lex Luthor. Why is he there? Well, he's getting a bunch of information on Superman, mainly figuring out once and for all that he is Clark Kent. He also probably used the Kryptonian technology to find out why children love the taste of Cinnamon Toast Crunch. I know I would. Now,
Now, back in Metropolis, Superman and Superboy are getting ready for a guy's weekend. Lois is going away to Paris to hunt down a very important story, but the evening gets shattered when John ends up getting a terrifying text. You see, someone knows exactly what plane Lois is riding on, calls out an attack, and even more so refers to her as Mrs. Superman. Oh, now that last bit just isn't fair. She prefers to be called Miss Superman Lane. She hyphenates. They had a whole big conversation about it. Big Blue rushes into action to save his wife, and I'm sure all the other people on the plane who would have died if this whole missile plot had managed to work itself out. The weird thing is that these missiles aren't your regular, normal, everyday weapons of death. They're half human material and also half Kryptonian material. And from there, the wheels start turning, and it doesn't take a Batman-level detective for Superman to figure out what's going on here. It was a Lex Airlines flight. These were LexCorp missiles assembled by someone who had to be incredibly intelligent. There's really only one answer for all of this, and that is Lex Luthor, despite his current dalliances with superheroics, has finally broken bad once again. Only when Superman hits up his office, he denies all wrongdoing, and not in the regular rich white CEO way of denying all wrongdoing. There's actually some proof pointing to Lex not being involved, not the least of which being his battle suit that hasn't been used in the last 36 hours. A suit that, by the way, he's completely reworked since his last falling out with Superman. No longer does it carry the House of L symbol, but just the good old Lex initials. Now, Lois isn't going to let a little thing like an attempt on her life slow her down. She's back in the office the very next day, only she comes under attack once again the very next day. The villain in question says that at the end of the day, it isn't kryptonite that's Superman's true weakness, it's Lois that will bring him down in the end. This villain is revealed to be Lex Luthor in a bigger, badder, newer battlesuit made with both LexCorp tech as well as based off designs from the old Kryptonian battle armors. But wait, how could any of this be possible, you might be asking? It gets even crazier when the destruction ends up actually disturbing Lex Luthor, who shows up in a modern suit to try and save people from getting hurt. Superman ends up doing battle with the second Lex Luthor. This gets pretty difficult considering that the Kryptonian battle suit has been made for the sole purpose to, well, fight other Kryptonians. Superman eventually cracks the suit wide open like a can of tuna, and on the inside he's shocked to discover an 80-year-old Lex Luthor near his deathbed, but still very smart enough to master time travel in an attempt to get over on his arch-rival one last time. Even if all of the strain of everything that's been going on recently causes him to have a heart attack and his suit to explode before current-day Lex gets a chance to see what's going on. What's crazy though is that as the comic winds down, Superman opts not to tell Lex Luthor about the actions of his more evil future self, hoping perhaps in some way that Lex will choose to go a different way in his life, and that perhaps this future battle can be stopped before it even gets a chance to start. So that was Action Comics Special number 1, everybody, and overall it was a pretty decent send-off to Jurgens' era on Superman, of which one of the coolest aspects has always been the shifting morality of Lex Luthor. I appreciate they just didn't flip a magic switch in this issue and make him be a bad guy again just so the status quo could be maintained, but instead they imply that, history isn't set in stone yet. Yes, Lex is mad at Superman, he's not working directly with him, he doesn't have a lot of respect for him right now, but at the same time he still might be trying to be a hero in his own right, and seeing as he's going to have a big part in Justice League No Justice, maybe we haven't seen the last of heroic Lex Luthor just yet. Except for when Doomsday Clock ends up hitting about 3 years in the future of this current storyline, but there's lots of time for that.